On the prior inconsistent statement or prior consistent statement?
Yes, I think that as the court pointed out yesterday, it is not, they cannot prove that it is earlier in time, prior. So Mr. Kuriyama was explaining some other theory.
Yeah, under Evidence Code Section 791, it has to be prior to the testimony that occurs in the trial, is what my understanding.
Well, that's always the situation. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a prior statement.
But that is what's.
That's not the foundational element of it. How could that be?
Well, they're saying, our defense is contending that this statement must take place at some time before there was some kind of motive to fabricate.
Well, let's go back just so we have a point of reference here. Has the defense offered any prior inconsistent statement to the testimony of Mr. Signorelli?
No, Your Honor.
Let me hear the response of the prosecution.
All I pointed out was that.
Wait. I'm talking to Mr. Kuriyama. Has there been a prior inconsistent statement offered of Mr. Signorelli?
There was a statement by well, there's testimony by Mr. Signorelli, and under Evidence Code Section 791, B, if there has been an attack on credibility of an express or implied charge that the testimony at the hearing is recently fabricated or is influenced by bias or other improper motive, then a previous consistent statement may be admissible.
And your contention is that, going back to my question, that there has not been any inconsistent statements offered in regards to Mr. Signorelli, but that there has been an allegation of express or implied allegation of recent fabrication, or that his testimony is influenced by bias or other motive, and that the statement was made before the bias, motive, or fabrication is alleged to have arisen. Is that what you're saying? And when, as we were discussing yesterday, the issue is, when was this statement made to Mr. Whalen, and when was, or when is it alleged that this bias or motive for fabrication arose? The prior statement must have been made prior to this bias or motive for fabrication.
We know that the statement that Casey Whalen heard or was given by Craig Signorelli occurred prior to October 3rd, 1990. He, as he testified in the 402, wasn't sure when he heard that statement. However, it's not been demonstrated. I believe it's the defense that has to establish when this motive to fabricate arose. It's not, I don't think it's the burden of the people to show when that occurred.
Well, that's an interesting issue. We have a witness who comes in and testifies to some motive to fabricate of another witness, and also testifies or could testify about a prior statement consistent with that witness's testimony. And the impeaching witness as to both matters is imprecise as to when those incidents occurred in the past, which is basically what we have here.
Well, I think
we have other issues here dealing with the credibility of the witness himself, Mr. Whalen. The fact that it is a fact that he heard this statement from Mr. Signorelli and didn't ask for any details, although he professes to be a very close friend of the defendant. Didn't ask any details of Mr. Signorelli as to what had been stated to him, and did not relate anything to Mr. Menendez at the jail of any such statements that were attributed to Mr. Signorelli. That relates to the credibility of Mr. Whalen.
let me just indicate that with respect to Mr. Signorelli, our position when he was on the witness stand himself was that he had a grudge against Erik, that his friendship with Erik had been severed effectively before Erik moved to Beverly Hills. What Mr. Whalen has testified to is that at the time that the Menendez family moved to Beverly Hills, Mr. Signorelli's friendship with Erik was not as strong, and Mr. Signorelli was upset about that. So that bias arose in 1988. The family moved to Beverly Hills in October of 1988. And so there are no statements prior to the time that his grudge against Erik for switching his allegiance to another friend arose. And in any event, and what we've also proven from Mr. Whalen is that prior to the move to Beverly Hills, Mr. Signorelli had been banned from the Menendez home. And so our contention is that it is those things that led to Signorelli's bias against Erik Menendez. With respect to the statement that Mr. Signorelli may have made to Mr. Whalen, it's obvious that Mr. Whalen cannot say that it occurred, certainly not prior to October 1988, but he cannot say it arose prior to November 17th, 1989, when Mr. Signorelli made his first statement concerning these issues to the Beverly Hills police. And the people were permitted over objection to elicit the fact that Mr. Signorelli had made a prior consistent statement with his testimony at this trial on November 17th, 1989, on the basis that I had pointed out that in that November 17th statement, Mr. Signorelli claimed that his conversation with Erik Menendez, which contained the purported confession, had occurred on October 22nd and not the end of August as he testified here. So based on that, I don't believe the people have the right to elicit this statement as a prior consistent statement under 791A or B.
All right, did the people wish to argue this matter further?
In addition, I believe to be admissible under 791, it also is admissible to go to the state of mind of this particular witness as it relates to Erik Menendez and any statements that he may have made to Erik Menendez. Whether or not the statement is true, he heard that information and he had spoken to Erik Menendez subsequent to that information being related to him. And it I believe, is relevant to show that this witness had an opportunity to learn from the defendant himself at the defendant's request. He was to be a witness, that he had the opportunity to learn from the defendant himself that which would benefit the defendant in this trial.
Go through that one once more, please.
I believe that in addition to being an exception, in addition to being admissible under 791, that it also goes to the state of mind of this witness, in as much as he had this information, he went to talk to Erik Menendez subsequent to gaining this information. He had the opportunity to learn from the defendant himself that which would assist the defendant in this trial.
Well, Your Honor, that's all very interesting, but the fact of the matter is there's no evidence whatsoever that he learned anything from the defendant in order to assist in this trial. What he's testified to is that he visited the defendant around Memorial Day, which is May of 1990. That's 2 months after Erik Menendez was arrested. He indicated he visited in the usual manner, which is the jail, which we know is over a phone, and that he was told that the phones were taped. And he testified they did not discuss the case. Now, the people have no evidence to rebut that. And in fact, we have a corroborating witness that we're going to call this morning who was on one of those visits, who will indicate that indeed the case was not discussed. So this is wild speculation on the part of the people. I mean, the real question is not whether Casey Whalen heard Craig Signorelli's story about Erik confessing to him, but whether he is testifying truthfully and based on his memory, or is testifying because Erik told him what to say. Now, the people can ask him, did Erik tell you what to say? And they'll get a straight answer.
All right. Well, obviously, from what you're saying, and it's obvious to anyone here that the credibility of Mr. Whalen is at issue, as well as the credibility of Mr. Signorelli. And it seems to me that First of all, we've had some discussion of Mr. Whalen's report, or the report taken by the police department of Mr. Whalen's statement, wherein Mr. Whalen indicates that he thought that the entire issue about being abused by the parents was a hoax. That's not been admissible and is not being offered by the prosecution, but the credibility of Mr. Whalen is at issue. And it seems to me that, as I indicated before, if presented with statements by Mr. Signorelli that his best friend had admitted to the killing of his parents to Mr. Signorelli, one would have expected that Mr. Whalen would have inquired of Mr. Signorelli. Well, what did he say? What were the details? What happened?
Signorelli testified he didn't even inquire of Erik Menendez. Why? How? He never asked any questions. That's what he testified.
Well, counsel, we had testimony from Mr. Signorelli as to the details as related by your client.
But
He didn't have to ask. Your client said it. So now the issue is, why didn't Whalen ask what were the details?
He knows Signorelli is a fantasizer and a liar, and that's what he'll say, and he didn't believe him.
All right, well, and that's the risk the prosecution runs in bringing out this evidence. I think it's relevant evidence as to the credibility of Mr. Whalen.
I don't see how it bears on Mr. Whalen's credibility. Was he supposed to ask Erik Menendez on a taped
No, he
phone?
should. My remarks involve what one would have expected Mr. Whalen to say to Mr. Signorelli in that situation.
But, Your Honor, the credibility of what he should have done in that situation doesn't arise unless the court allows that. This is a circular argument. In other words, our position is the fact that Craig Signorelli told him this is itself not admissible.
No, I'm saying it's admissible to attack the credibility of Mr. Whalen.
But it's only his credibility as to that statement that is now attackable. The fact that he didn't ask Mr. Signorelli follow-up questions.
Well, this is
so
the
it's
heart.
A circle.
No, this is the heart of the case and a significant part of the case as to the state of mind of the defendant, whether he made statements to others. And at this, in this context, it seems to me that the issue is Whalen's credibility and the fact that he didn't, according to his own testimony here, ask any details about it.
He hasn't testified to this, so his credibility on this issue is not before the jury. Now, the court wants to put this before the jury to set it up so that he can then be attacked on his credibility vis-a-vis this statement.
No, that's not true. You put him on the witness stand. His credibility is before the jury, and this is an appropriate area of examination to attack his credibility. It's not an extraneous matter. It's not a collateral matter.
It's hearsay.
It's
Craig Signorelli hearsay that doesn't fit any exception to the hearsay rule that's being put on in order to attack this witness's credibility that he didn't ask Craig Signorelli follow-up questions. But the threshold issue is, why is Signorelli's statement to him admissible in the first place? And the court is saying it's because he didn't ask him questions about it. But the fact is the statement's not admissible. So that whether he asked him questions about it or not is not relevant.
All right. We also have to bear in mind that this is a situation in which the evidence has already been presented to the jury that Mr. Signorelli has made a prior statement to the police about this incident. It's not something being brought out of the blue that the jury hasn't already heard of. So any prejudice that the defense argues might arise from this is substantially outweighed by its probative value on the issue of the credibility of Mr. Whalen. Therefore, the objection is overruled. Anything else before we proceed with the jury? All right, let's get the jury in, please.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Qunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Qunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Qunol, the brand I trust.
All right, the jury is back. Good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. All right, we'll proceed with the cross-examination. Would you state your name again for the record, please?
Kevin Christopher Whalen. Casey is my nickname.
Okay, Mr. Whalen, I'll remind you you're still under oath.
Yes, sir.
All right, you may continue your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Whalen, when is it that you first visited defendant Erik Menendez in jail?
I believe it was around the time of Memorial Weekend of what would be 90.
1990?
Yes, sir.
And how many times did you visit him?
Twice. I believe it was either back-to-back days or one day a break, and then the next day it was. I think it was back-to-back days. I'm not quite sure.
And after that, those visits, when did you next visit?
It would be January of '93, around the 12th or 13th with Mrs. Abramson. Ms. Abramson.
That's a total of 3 times.
Yes, sir.
Did you testify yesterday in a hearing outside the presence of the jury?
I'm going to object, Your Honor, foundation.
Overruled to that question, obviously, it's foundational at this point.
Did you testify yesterday?
Yeah, yes, sir.
In that hearing, did you state that you had made more visits than that?
I said
Your Honor, mistake the testimony.
Overruled.
3 or 4 times. I wasn't quite sure, I believe.
You never visited in 1991 or 1992?
No, sir.
In your statement on October the 3rd, 1990, as you testified yesterday, that Erik Menendez had asked you to be a character witness and you were due to visit Erik Menendez in the jail, and you will further discuss the matter with him. Did you not go and visit him after that October 3rd report?
I did not. I wanted to, and I never did.
Did you ever receive any phone calls at your home from Erik Menendez?
No, sir.
Now, on October 3rd, 1990, you gave a statement to the Beverly Hills Police Department, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in that statement, did you relate information that you had received from Craig Signorelli?
Object in the form of a question, Your Honor.
Sustained. Rephrase the question, please.
Did Craig Signorelli, prior to your interview on October 3rd, 1990, tell you about the murders of Mr. and Mrs. Menendez?
I believe, like I said yesterday, sometime between when I was in Santa Barbara, between September and January, Craig had told me, and I've also heard from other people that he'd said that Erik had admitted it to him that he had killed his parents, as I stated yesterday.
And that was between September of 1989 and January of 1990?
Yes, sir. While I was in Santa Barbara before I left for Connecticut.
Can you be any more specific?
No, sir, I cannot. As yesterday, you asked me a few different times, and I just said I couldn't put a finger on it. I just don't remember exactly when it was.
Do you know who was present when the statement was related to you by Craig Signorelli?
No, sir, I do not.
Now, getting back to the day that you supposedly picked up Erik Menendez from the airport,
Yes, sir.
you indicated that you got to the house, that you went upstairs to his bedroom, correct?
Yes, sir.
That Erik Menendez got some clothes,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yeah, checked his messages.
Checked his messages, made no phone calls.
That I remember, no.
You testified yesterday he made no phone calls. Is that
That
correct?
actually states his testimony.
Rephrase the question, please.
Did Erik Menendez make any phone calls?
I said none that I remembered yesterday. When you asked me if he'd made any phone calls while we were checking the computer, I said, not that I remember.
Well, we were checking the computer. When
Is
you,
that what I
when
just
you
said?
checked his phone messages when you first got to the house, you indicated he made no return calls.
No.
Is
no,
that
sir.
correct?
Right, correct.
And you don't recall if the computer man made a phone call.
I don't remember.
And the only time you were out of the presence of Erik Menendez was a few minutes before you actually left.
Yes, sir. From what I remember, yes, sir.
And while the computer person was in the bedroom, you were there the whole time, correct?
In the bedroom, yes, sir.
And you said the bed was 5 feet away,
I said 5 to 10 feet. I didn't know exact measurements. It was about that.
and you were playing with a tennis ball that whole time.
And well, I stopped and looked over his shoulder to see what they were doing. And then I just kind of was waiting for them to get done with what they were doing.
Yesterday, you had indicated that Erik Menendez had his Ford Escort at your house.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall when the car was there?
Yeah, we went back and got it the next day.
That's what you recall now?
Yes, sir. Because I went back and I wanted to make sure that I remembered that I was telling the right story. So I just wanted to make sure that I knew his car was there, and I went back and got it the next day. Because I went and talked to my sister about it last night. I just wanted to make sure I was telling the right story.
Telling the right story.
I just want to tell the truth, sir. And yesterday I'd said the car was there, and I knew he had his car during the week, so I took him back the next day to get it.
And you recall that because your sister told you that?
No, I said, Katie, Erik had his car. And she goes, yeah, you remember taking him to get his car at the Beverly Hills house? And I said, was that the next day? And she said, yeah. And my mom said the same thing. So it's just after 4 years, a lot of these things, I just wanted to make sure I was telling the right story when I got up here.
You didn't recall that yesterday?
No, sir. I said his car was there during the week, and I wasn't quite sure how it got there because he and I rode back the original day to my house together in my mom's car. And I took him to get it the next day.
Who was with you?
The next day?
Yes.
Just he and I.
And what time was that?
I have no idea. Sometime after we got up, maybe we caught lunch. I don't remember. It was 4 years ago.
The day that you picked up Erik Menendez, you specifically remember that particular day?
I remember events like I stated yesterday. Yes, sir.
What do you remember about that day?
Objection, Your Honor.
Why don't you rephrase the question?
What specifically do you recall about the day that you picked up Erik Menendez?
I object.
That's a little too broad.
Okay.
Why don't you focus?
What do you remember about after you left the room, the computer room, that day?
I walked down out to the car. Erik came out about 4 minutes later with a few things in his hands. We went home. We had dinner with my sister and my mother and Erik and myself. We went to bed. That's what I remember from the day.
And what time is it that you left the Beverly Hills house?
I have no idea. I said that his flight had maybe gotten in at noon. We were at the house at 2. I don't remember. Maybe I have no idea. It was 4 years ago. I don't even remember the events.
Flight arrived at LAX at noon,
I believe so.
and it took how long to get to Beverly Hills from LAX?
I have no idea. By the time we got his bags and got there, I don't know if there was traffic. I just don't remember. I mean, some days it could probably take a half an hour, some days an hour with traffic. I just don't know what the traffic was like that day. I just don't remember those specific events.
You had indicated yesterday that you were there with the computer man from about 30 to 45 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And when you left out of the room, you left the computer man with Erik Menendez. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I believe I left a few minutes before he came down to see me.
Okay. Did you go to your car in front of the house?
Yes, sir. We got out to the car there.
Okay. And was it parked in the driveway or on the street?
It was parked on the other side of the street. It was just parked on that side of the street.
In the front of the house?
Yes, sir.
When you saw Erik Menendez come out a few minutes after you left, did he have a little bag with him?
I don't remember specifically. I just remember he needed to pick up some clothes because he needed a few extra things, a few notes. I wasn't quite sure. So I don't remember specifically what he had in his hand.
When you left the bedroom with the computer, did you say, Erik, I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to be in the car waiting for you?
More or less, something to that effect. I don't remember specifically what I said.
Did you know at that time how long it would take the computer man to finish his job?
I believe I wouldn't have gone. I mean, I figured they were wrapping up whatever they were doing, that it was, I was just like, well, I'm sure you'll be down in a few minutes, whatever. I didn't know what they needed to talk about. And I figured it was probably towards the end of what they were doing.
Now, were you parked on the side of the street closest to the house or the opposite side?
Opposite side.
Did you look toward the house, the front of the house, and see Erik Menendez exit the front doors?
Maybe, I'm sure by the time I was getting in the car, maybe I saw him standing by the car. I mean,
Your Honor, I'm going to object and move to strike the answer as speculation.
Objection, sustain the answer.
At some point, you went down to your car, which was parked in the front of the house, and you were waiting for Erik Menendez to come, correct?
yes, sir.
And at some point, you saw him coming.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I might have been in the car.
It's a speculation.
Objection, sustain. answer what you remember, not what might have happened. Just what you remember.
Sir, I don't remember specifically what happened. I could have been turning the stereo, moving the car so Eric could sit down. I just don't specifically. I might have looked at him. I might have not. I might have been turning the car around. And by the time he was at the door, opening the door. So I just don't know whether I was looking at him or I never even looked at him. By the time I'd open the door, I'd turn the car around and he was standing right there to get in. So I might not have even seen him walk out.
I would just like all of that as speculation.
All right. Objection sustained. The answer is correct. I want you to pursue it if you care to, Mr. Whalen.
Mr. Whalen, after you left out, did you leave out the front door?
Objection, Your Honor, this has been asked and answered.
Overruled.
Did you leave out the front door?
Yes, sir. Through the gates.
And then went through the front gates and then got to your car. And a couple minutes later, Eric was at your car. You don't know how he got there, but he was there. Is that
I would
right?
object to the question of this state's evidence.
Overruled. You can answer that.
Is that correct, Mr. Whalen?
Once again, I don't recall the actual events leading up to Eric being in the car.
Okay, you're just recalling somehow getting in the car. Is that
Exactly. The next thing I knew, we were on our way back to my house. So I don't remember.
In your recollection, it was a couple minutes later.
Yes, from what I remember. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, this next day would have been September 2nd.
That's correct.
You supposedly drove Eric back to his house in Beverly Hills,
Yes, sir.
and you don't recall what time that was,
No, sir.
whether it was morning or night.
I would believe it was afternoonish. Again, I said we probably woke up, maybe had lunch or something. And I took him to get his car. I don't recall.
Did Erik Menendez have his keys with him to his car?
I guess he must have if he was going to pick up his car to drive it. I mean, I might have taken him to the house and he might have got the keys from inside. I don't recall. I just knew that I had to get him to his house so he could pick up his car.
Okay, let's just stay on that subject then. When you drove him to his house in Beverly Hills, did you wait for him to get his car?
I don't remember.
Did you go somewhere with him after you got his car?
I don't remember.
You do remember that you took him to get his car.
Well, I remembered he needed his car for the week because I had errands to run, like I talked about yesterday, to get ready for school. And that, so I took him to get his car. I don't remember events leading up to or right after that.
So you don't know if he stayed at his house then?
I believe he left when I left. I just don't know, sir.
That same day, did you see Erik Menendez at your house?
I believe so. I don't remember specific events again, sir. I just don't. From that instance, I mean, he was at my house for up until I left for school, and then I left for school. So, we spent time. We watched movies together with my family. We went out a night. I went out one other night with some of my other friends. I just don't remember specifically what happened each day there. It was 4 years ago. Lots happened. I just don't remember.
So it's possible that he wasn't there a couple of nights, as far as you know.
Like I talked about yesterday, Eric and I went at.
Object to the question today, whether it's before the witness went back to school or after.
Overruled. Your answer.
The question one more time.
As far as you know, during the period of time that you were there,
Okay.
September 1st through the 5th, I believe you said,
Right.
you don't know if Erik Menendez was there at night.
Yes, because I had gone out with him a few nights, like I just said, and we watched a movie one night. But I remember one night I did not go out with him because I went out with some of my other friends before I left for school.
So you don't know where he was on that particular night.
Nope, I didn't know where he was that night.
Did you receive calls from Erik Menendez while he was staying at your house?
In Santa Barbara?
No, in Agora.
Why don't you rephrase that question?
Yeah.
Did you receive, Eric was supposedly staying at your house during this period of time,
Yes, sir.
September 1st through the 5th.
Right.
Did you receive phone calls from him?
He was staying at my house, sir. I didn't, not to my knowledge. I mean, I was either with him or he was out. I mean, I don't believe he called my house if he was staying there. So not that I remember.
Yeah, I have some phone records I'd like to
Well, before
Have
you
Mark-
Yeah, I'm showing them to council.
Yes, I asked council for these earlier. Yes, yes, I would like to.
Let's take a break and give council a chance to review the records, and we'll resume at 10 minutes after the hour. Ladies and gentlemen, don't discuss the case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We'll resume at 10 minutes after.
What do you need me to do, sir?
Why don't you stay there until the jurors leave, and then you can get down.
Okay. And just wait out there.
You can
Take a
sit
seat
in the
right there.
courtroom. Yeah.
Okay.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Sets of phone records that I would like to have Mark.
Your objections to use of these phone records because they have no probative value. What my attention has been directed to by Mr. Curiano, he's indicated the last few years, is these phone records are from two different lines at the Beverly Hills house and Menendez house. On one of the records for phone number 2850052, there appears an entry for September 2nd, 1989 at 2:18 p.m., a 1-minute registered call of 10 cents charge to Casey Whalen's number in Worth. On the other phone, excuse me, on the other phone record, which is for another line at the house, 271 0495, there appears to be two phone calls from that line on September 2nd at 3:12 in the afternoon, one for 1 minute, one for 2 minutes to Casey Whalen's number. Two phone calls on September 3rd, one of 2 minutes, one of 1 minute to Casey Whalen's number. One phone call, strike at 3 phone calls on September 3rd, 2 of 1 minute, one of 2 minutes. And one phone call on September 6th of 2 minutes.
What was the time of the calls on September 3rd?
Sorry, September 3rd, the times of the calls is 11:12 a.m., 11:48, 11:12 a.m., 4:35 p.m., and 11:48 p.m. And those are the only calls. The September 6th is a different number. So those are the only calls that I've been shown on this record to Casey Whalen's number. But the fundamental problem with this evidence, okay, is that, as the people well know, there were security guards at the Elmore Drive house 24 hours a day. And we were provided through discovery with notes of interviews with those security guards, one of which indicated that they knew during this period of time that Erik Menendez was staying at Casey's house. And it has this phone number in the note, 818-706-0313, as the place to reach Erik Menendez for the security guards. And so this evidence, given the fact there are people living there who are in effect charged with Erik's well-being, who are the conduits for information for him. And and that's what the note indicates as well. Erik can be reached at Casey's house, this number. The evidence just has no meaning with respect to this witness.
If I may respond, right?
Yes.
The fundamental strength of this evidence is that there are 6 calls in the zone 2 and 3 section. And those 6 calls are to Craig Signorelli's house.
Oh, well, counsel didn't call my attention to that when he handed me these documents before he chose to mark them, although I asked for them at 9 o'clock this morning and he refused to show me.
Okay, regardless of that, let me just hear the people's offer.
Well, if there are, this is the wrong witness to enter this.
Okay, well, I haven't heard what he had to say. Why not, without a filibuster, let's just hear it and then we'll discuss it.
The defense has had these phone records for years, so it's not like she just.
Okay, let's not dispute that aspect of it. We can do one thing at a time here.
With respect to these documents that I gave to her, consist of 4 pages as to that particular phone number, area code 213-271-0495. Now, with counsel's correct, with this particular witness, I will not be able to establish the foundation for that number that I related as being Craig Signorelli's number. However, at this point, all I'm doing is marking this as an exhibit. This witness will authenticate that which he can, and subsequent witnesses that we will be calling will authenticate the rest of it. So at this point, I don't think there's a well-taken objection to my marking this and showing it to this witness, because this witness can establish what his phone number was during that period of time.
Well, you don't have to show him the records to get his phone number. He has no firsthand knowledge of the phone records themselves. You could clearly ask him if he, and you already have, you asked him whether he had any knowledge of any phone calls from Erik Menendez to his residence, and his answer is before the jury. And if you want to establish his phone number, you can do that. The phone records speak for themselves or need interpretation from a phone company representative, depending upon foundational issues. But this witness has no knowledge of the phone records themselves. You could certainly ask him about any particular date and just focus on dates if you want to, as to specific dates if any phone calls occurred, things of that sort. But we haven't gotten to the stage where those records are relevant or admissible. I'll certainly let you mark them.
I would just mark them out. They're not going to be utilized with the witness, and I don't see the point in marking them in front of the jury. I wonder whether you
Well, regardless of that, he's asked that they be marked, and we'll mark them.
Yeah, I have no problem marking them now. What numbers are they?
All
One's
right.
212, the other one's, which one do you want 212, Mr. Cruz?
All right. You just, which one is,
The 213-271-0495 records number,
right,
212.
212, and the 285-0052 record is 215.
all right. They'll be marked as that, with those designations. Anything else before the jury comes in? All right, then let's have the jury panel in, please. And the jurors are back, and you may continue your cross-examination.
Here, I have a little sheet of paper. I have the sheet of paper where exhibit 214.
I'd like to see it.
Is it a blank piece of paper that you want somebody to write something on?
Exactly.
Okay, it'll be 214.
Thank you. And then push the witness.
Yes.
Mr. Whalen, I'm going to give you what's now a blank sheet, except for it says exhibit 214 in the right upper corner. I'm going to ask you to write down the phone numbers to your house where you're living in Agora during September of 1989, if you will.
Yes, sir. There you go.
There are two numbers.
Yes, sir.
You just sign your name.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whalen, getting back to what Erik Menendez had told Craig Signorelli as related to you by Craig Signorelli sometime between September of 1989 and January of 1990. What exactly did Craig Signorelli tell you?
Overall.
What did he tell me, or
Yes.
what did I? Okay, from Craig, just from what I remember, it was more or less Erik had admitted to me that he had killed his parents.
Now, at that point, you were a friend of Craig Signorelli's?
Yes, sir.
You were also a friend of Erik Menendez's?
Yes, sir.
Erik Menendez was still on the streets during that period of time, correct?
Yes, sir.
He wasn't arrested until March of 1990, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you call Erik Menendez up and tell him what you had heard from Craig Signorelli?
No, sir.
You did not.
Not from what I remember. No, sir.
Why not? Didn't you want?
Object, Your Honor. It's irrelevant.
Overall.
Did you want Erik Menendez to know what was being said about the murders?
I didn't know where he was living.
Had you ever been to his condominium in the Marina City Club,
No, sir.
Marina Del Rey?
No, sir.
At some point, did you learn of that fact?
Objection on the,
So say it.
At some point, did you learn that Erik Menendez was living in a condominium in the Marina City Club?
I'm going to object to characterization.
Overruled.
After the fact, after I'd heard on the news, after the boys had been arrested, I'd
Objection, Your Honor.
Right, the question, objection sustained, the answer is stricken. The question was, did you ever hear he was living somewhere?
no, I didn't know what he was doing.
At some point, did you learn that Erik Menendez was living in a condominium in Marina Del Rey?
Your Honor, the calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Not till after he was arrested. I didn't know anything about Marina Del Rey until they were arrested.
So when you gave that information to the police, that was in October of 1990, that was after the arrest, correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, that I learned that they had a place in Marina Del Rey, yeah.
So during that period of time, you didn't know where your best friend was living?
A best friend? He was a good friend of mine, yes, sir.
Now, at some point, you learned that he had been arrested, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was that in March of 1990?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, you went to visit him at the jail in May of 1990, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Yes, while I was in Connecticut when they were arrested, and when I got home, it was a few weeks later after I'd gotten back.
This Memorial Day weekend,
Yes, sir.
you went twice to the jail to visit Erik Menendez?
Yes, sir.
Of course, you told him what Craig Signorelli had told you.
Objection, argumentative.
Rephrase the question, please.
Did you tell Erik Menendez at that point what Craig Signorelli had told you months earlier?
No, sir.
Now, based on what you have testified to, Erik Menendez said he was going to kill the persons that killed his parents, correct?
What I don't.
Objection, Your Honor.
Your objection?
Well, misstates the evidence.
Rephrase the question, please.
Yes, I believe he testified that after the memorial service in Los Angeles, you went to the Bel Air Hotel, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you spent the night there with Erik Menendez and two other of your friends. Is that correct?
Three other.
Three other friends?
Yes, sir.
And you spent most of the night in the jacuzzi.
In and around the jacuzzi. That wasn't the gist of the night. Again, like I said, we needed to take Lyle to the airport. Other things occurred during the night. We ate. So,
But most of the time, as you've indicated, was spent in the jacuzzi. Is that correct?
Objection, misstates testimony.
Overruled.
no, we didn't spend most of the night in the jacuzzi. We spent some time in the jacuzzi.
Did you state on October 3rd that you spent most of the night in and around the jacuzzi?
In and around, right. That doesn't necessarily mean in the jacuzzi. Yes,
Did
sir.
you bring your swimming trunks with you that day?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevant.
Overruled.
No.
Were you in the jacuzzi?
Yes, sir. Boxers?
Boxers. Was Erik Menendez in the jacuzzi?
Yes, sir.
And did he have his swimming trunks on?
I don't recall, sir. Yes. I mean, it's some sort of undergarment on. Yes, sir.
Okay. So were you sipping champagne in this jacuzzi?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
No, sir.
Were you drinking?
No, sir. No.
Was it during this period of time that you heard Erik Menendez make the statement about killing the people that had killed his parents?
There were 4 or 5 of us having a conversation. Like I stated yesterday, I'd overheard the gist of it.
Was that while you were sitting in the jacuzzi?
I don't recall.
It could have been.
Yes, sir.
Now, when you visited Erik Menendez in May of 1990, did you go alone?
No, sir.
Who was with you?
The first day I went with a friend whose father was down there. And
I'm sorry. What was
the
that?
first day I went with a friend whose father was in jail.
Yes.
And the next day or 2 days later, whenever I went, I was with my sister.
This friend whose father was in jail, did he go and visit his father while you were visiting Erik Menendez?
No, he couldn't. He came to see Erik because he knew Erik from my high school as well.
So you sat in together.
Yes, sir.
Did you write any notes to Erik Menendez during either of these two visits?
Yes, sir.
And did you write notes to Erik Menendez?
Yes, sir.
Did you get any notes in return?
No, sir.
How did he respond to you, to your notes?
Well, we knew that everything we talked about was going to be taped. So it was either, I wrote one sentence and it was either a nod or a shrug. So
what you were talking about, you didn't want the authorities to know about.
well, the one question I asked him, it said, do you want me to stand trial for you? And he just kind of shrugged like he didn't know at the time. So it was something along that line.
During that particular meeting, was that with your friend or with your sister?
That was with my sister when I had the note.
At some point during that particular meeting, did Erik Menendez tell you, yeah, I want you to be a witness for me?
No, sir. Like I said before, he kind of shrugged and he didn't know what the state of the case was.
And that was the second time that you had visited Erik Menendez then, correct?
That was when I was with my sister, correct.
And the only other time that you ever talked to him and actually have a face-to-face visit with him was in January of 1993.
After that fact, yes, with Mrs. Abramson.
Now, why is it that on October 3rd, 1990, you told the police that Erik had asked you to be a character witness for him?
When I wrote him the note, I didn't know what standing trial meant, whether he wanted me. He was a friend of mine and I wanted to help him out any way I could. I didn't know what the actual title of what I just wanted to help out a friend. So I'd asked him if he wanted me to stand trial.
The question is, during that meeting, you discussed being a witness for him, and he never said, yeah, I want you to be a witness. Yet, this is a statement that you made to the police on October 3rd, 1990, that he had asked you to be a witness for him?
I said that he had shrugged like kind of, well, yeah, I don't know. And that's what I had said here. So I took it as, yeah, I guess Erik's going to maybe need my help to be a character witness.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Redirect.
That piece of paper, Your Honor, rather crumpled, which I'd like to mark as the next. Is that correct, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen, do you recognize item 215?
Yes, ma'am. It's my writing.
I haven't asked you yet.
Okay.
Slow down.
All right.
What is item 215?
It is the note that I brought with me that day that I wrote on to Erik.
Break that down. Did you bring a note to the visit already written out, or did you write the note out while you were visiting Erik?
While I was visiting Erik.
And is that the note you wrote that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Why did you keep it?
That's just the kind of person I am. I have every shirt I've had since I just keep things. I guess. I mean, some people are neat freaks. I guess I am. That's just.
And it's all crumpled up, that piece of paper. How did it get crumpled up?
It was stuffed away in a drawer, and I actually just found it at the beginning of last month.
And when did you give it to me?
This morning.
And when did you tell me you still had it?
Last night. I didn't know if I still had it. I had to go check my drawer.
Then you found it last night in your drawer.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, that piece of paper, what would you just read the first word that's on that piece of paper?
It says forgot.
And was that something you wrote to Erik?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that in response to something he said?
No, I was going to ask him a question, and I forgot what it was.
So you wrote in that you forgot the question you were trying to ask.
Exactly.
And then did you write what's below that on the note after that?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you read to the jury what's below the word forgot on the note?
Do you want me to maybe stand trial?
And by stand trial, you didn't mean you wanted to take his chair over here on the on trial setting.
No, ma'am. I didn't know what it entailed. I don't know anything.
You didn't know that someone who comes to testify is called a witness of that.
I had no idea.
And was there some cryptic conversation between you and Erik after you wrote that note in which he indicated maybe he could use you as a witness, maybe not?
That was the shrugging that I alluded to earlier, that he said, yeah, maybe I could need you.
Now, when you visited Erik on all three occasions, in fact, did you have to talk over a telephone to him?
That is correct.
Let's talk about the first visit when you went with the friend.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the friend's name?
Scott Fair. Faer. Faer.
Excuse me. And when you went to visit Erik on that occasion, were there other people visiting at the same time?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there other inmates being visited?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there people sitting right next to you
Yes, ma'am.
on both sides of you?
Yes, ma'am. We had to stand because there was only one chair. So Scott stood behind me while I talked to Erik, and then vice versa.
And was there someone visiting somebody else to your right
Yes, ma'am.
and somebody visiting somebody else to your left?
Yes, ma'am.
And then there's all these windows that you're looking at.
That is correct.
And behind the window you're in front of was Erik.
Yes, ma'am.
And he was talking to you on a phone.
That is correct.
So you couldn't pass notes.
No, there's no. He was shackled and everything. No, I mean there's a barrier.
Okay. Inside the jail, when he came to the visits, that you saw his hands are chained together, are they not?
Yes, and his feet.
And so if you'd write a note, the way for him to know what's in your note is what?
Hold it up to the window.
Hold it up on the glass so he can read it.
Right.
And then he nods or shrugs or does something in response to your note.
Exactly.
Now, on that occasion, when you were there with Scott Fair, did you discuss any facts about the case with Erik whatsoever?
No, ma'am.
The next visit that you made in the company of your sister,
That is correct.
and her name is Katie Whalen,
That's correct.
and that's the occasion on which you wrote the note.
That is correct.
And you described on the first visit that Scott Fair had to stand behind you. On this visit, did Katie stand behind you?
Yeah, we kind of switched off talking to him.
If you were writing a note, would that mean that you were the person sitting down?
That is correct.
And on that occasion, when your sister was there, did you discuss anything about the case itself with Erik?
No, ma'am.
What was your purpose, Mr. Whalen, in going to visit Erik on these two occasions in May of 1990?
I wanted to see how he was doing.
So was it a personal visit?
Without a doubt. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Were you concerned about him?
Very much so.
Did you care about his welfare?
Very much so.
Were you trying to show support?
Without a doubt. Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Kuriyama asked you about this statement that Craig Signorelli made to you. What did you say to Craig Signorelli when he made this statement to you?
I just found it hard to believe.
Did you tell him you thought he was lying?
I just found it hard to believe the first time and walked away.
And this is when he supposedly told you that Erik had admitted killing his parents.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, was based on your lengthy acquaintanceship with Mr. Signorelli, did you believe at that point that he was capable of making a story like this up?
Very much so.
Was he someone who, in your experience, liked to be the center of attention?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he like to brag and boast around his peer group?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that what you thought he was doing?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you, when you were in Santa Barbara, hear from a number of different people that Craig had been going around town making the same statement? Oh, Erik Menendez confessed to me.
I'm sorry?
Objection calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Well, it has to do with this witness's state of mind, Your Honor, and credibility.
Objection sustained.
Did Craig Signorelli make another statement to you concerning what he was going to say about Erik after he made that first statement?
I'm not sure what you're.
I'm not sure you understand. All right,
Yes, ma'am.
let me get to it. In August of 1990, did Craig tell you that he wanted to go back to the police and tell them that Lyle had forced Erik to kill his parents?
That is correct.
And did you see Craig again in September of 1990?
Yes, ma'am.
And on that occasion, did Craig again say to you that he wanted to try and prove that Lyle forced Erik to do it?
Yes, ma'am.
So he was making up stories. Is that correct? In August and September of 1990?
Yes, it turned out yes, ma'am.
Now, at the time that you went to visit Erik in May of 1990, had there already been television coverage of this case which featured Craig Signorelli?
Yes, since March. I mean, I was in Connecticut, so I had no other tie to it except for seeing things on TV. Yes, ma'am.
Things like hard copy and...
Exactly.
Now, Mr. Whalen, since this trial began, you have been most of the time away at school. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Where are you currently attending school?
Arizona State University,
And what year are you in now?
a senior.
And do you hold any position or post with the school?
Objection irrelevant.
Overall.
Yes, ma'am. I'm a devil's advocate, which we do orientation for students coming in. Member of the Interfraternity Council Cabinet. I'm a Rush chairman of my fraternity, executive council member. I also work with Christine Wilkinson, who's vice president of the school, for orientation things. So
Okay. Well, strike that. You know that this trial, among other places, is being carried on a cable network called Court TV.
correct.
And have you actually observed certain sessions of the case on Court TV?
Yes, ma'am.
And as to sessions that you have not personally observed, have you been made aware of some of the testimony in the case?
Yes, my sister cuts out the article every day, so I read every day what's going on.
All right. So you are aware, are you not, Mr. Whalen, that there has been testimony in this case that the computer person who came to Erik's house was accompanied by a very pregnant wife?
Yes, I don't remember her being there.
But you do know that that's been the testimony.
Yes, ma'am.
And do you believe you are a person who is capable of lying if you wanted to?
Objection, this is an improper.
It's argumentative.
You recall being interviewed by a private investigator named Randy Later and myself at your home, your parents' home in Agora in January of '93.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember at that time we went over your recollection of being at the house when the computer person came there?
Yes, ma'am.
And you recall at that time you understood that the computer person was accompanied by his wife.
Yes, ma'am.
And at that time you recall telling me that you couldn't remember the wife.
Yes.
This is hearsay.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Mr. Whalen, are you lying under oath here in this trial?
No, ma'am.
Are you making up things that you don't really remember?
No, ma'am.
Are you testifying only to what you actually can remember?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you are aware of the fact, are you not, that Craig Signorelli claimed that he was the person that was there when the computer people came?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he tell the truth about that?
No, ma'am.
Based on your knowledge of Craig Signorelli, is he capable of making up that story?
Yes, ma'am.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Now, we've talked about the 2 visits that you made to the jail in May of 1990. And I believe you testified the 3rd time you went was in January of 1993,
Yes, ma'am.
and you went with me.
Yes, ma'am.
And did I give you some instructions before the visit began?
Yes, ma'am.
Overruled.
What did I instruct you?
Don't talk about anything about the case.
And did you follow my instructions?
You sat right next to me to make sure I did. Yes, ma'am.
And at the time that you visited Erik in January of 1993, was that after Mr. Later and I had interviewed you at your home?
Yes, ma'am. A few days later.
Do you recall when Erik was staying at your house, his receiving telephone calls from other people?
I don't remember.
Okay. You do recall, I believe, that he made calls to relatives of his?
Sustained.
Do you remember him making any phone calls at all while he was staying at your house before you left for school?
Yes, ma'am.
And who do you recall his calling?
His aunt trying to get a hold of Lyle.
And do you know whether or not he ever got a hold of Lyle from your house?
I believe it was the day after we were at the Beverly Hills house or the day after that.
So at some point, you believe he did reach Lyle from your house?
Yes, ma'am.
When you came back from Connecticut in May of 1990, and you wanted to see Erik, was there something you had to do to be able to get to visit Erik?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was it you had to do to be able to get to visit Erik?
You had to call the grandmother.
Eric's grandmother?
Yes, ma'am.
You had to arrange to visit through her?
Yes, ma'am, because I was made aware that she was going down every day and you had to go when she went or a day she wasn't going.
Okay, was it your understanding that the jail only permits 1 visiting session for an inmate a day?
I was made aware of that once I was trying to find out if I could see Erik. Yes, ma'am.
So that if you didn't make the arrangements with the grandmother and Mrs. Menendez had gone down there first, you wouldn't be able to visit.
Exactly.
Now, when you went down there the first day to see Erik, was his grandmother with you?
Not with me going down there, but she was at the place when I arrived.
She was at the jail.
Yes.
So you met with her.
Yes, ma'am.
So you could all go in together?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you all go in together?
Well, Noelle, who Erik was dating at the time, and Jamie, who Lyle was dating at the time, were there as well.
Okay. So let's just talk about who was visiting Erik that day. Did his grandmother actually visit with him that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And you visited with him?
Yes, ma'am.
And his girlfriend, Noelle, visited with him?
Yes, ma'am.
And your friend, Scott, who was with you?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's 4 people.
Yes, ma'am.
How long was the visiting period?
I think 20 minutes.
20
tops.
minutes total.
Yes, ma'am. 20 minutes.
That was the limit on visiting. Is that
Yes,
correct?
ma'am, from what I remember.
So the 4 of you spent 20 minutes visiting with Erik together,
Just kind of passing the phone around. Yes, ma'am.
and each one saying a few words.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, for the second visit with your sister Katie, the next time, did you also meet up with Mrs. Menendez, Erik's grandmother, on that occasion?
Yes, ma'am.
Was Noelle also there, Erik's girlfriend?
No, ma'am.
So was it just the 3 of you that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that another 20-minute visit?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you allow his grandmother to talk to him during that visit?
Yes, ma'am.
So you passed the phone around again.
That's correct.
And you recall that the time I went down there with you in January of 93,
Yes, ma'am.
Did they limit us to a 20-minute visit also?
Not even that long, ma'am. Yes.
Now, you indicated to Detective Zoller when you spoke to him in October of 90 that you did have intentions of visiting Erik again.
That is correct.
And were you prevented somehow by these other people?
I just didn't end up going to see him. Things got in the way. I just didn't have the time to go see him.
Was it also difficult to get his girlfriend in particular to relinquish any time for you to visit?
Yes, ma'am. That's for sure.
She was being kind of possessive.
Objection to reading, Your Honor.
Sustained.
I just want to take you back, based on your lengthy acquaintanceship with Craig Signorelli and including 1989, what color, for as long as you've known him, is Craig Signorelli's hair?
Black or really dark brown.
And was it black or really dark brown in August and September of 1989?
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the time when you were in Erik's house and on the day that the computer person came, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
At some point during that visit at Erik's house, did you notice that there were boxes of things in his bedroom?
Yes, ma'am.
And what kinds of things were in the boxes?
Tennis rackets, tennis stuff, papers in them, various things, various boxes with various things in them.
And did you spend any time looking through those boxes in Erik's room while you were at his house?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, and do you recall now whether or not you did that before or after the computer person arrived?
Before.
But I take it was after Erik had received that note that was supposed to be from Lyle.
Yes, then we went upstairs, he checked his messages, and then we looked through the boxes.
Now, you said that he seemed shook up from that note, and so were you.
Overall, I'll let you ask the question. But let's not go over the same
No.
material as before.
Were you both shook up by this note?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you've answered the question.
Okay.
Do you remember if there was a telephone number in the note, a place where Lyle supposedly could be reached?
I never saw the note. I don't know.
You've indicated to Mr. Kuriyama that there was one evening when Erik was staying at your house that you didn't spend the evening with him.
Yes, ma'am.
I think Mr. Kuriyama said one night that you didn't spend with Erik.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, where did Erik sleep that night?
At my house. We just didn't go out that night.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
After you moved to Santa Barbara to attend school, did you maintain contact with Erik?
No, I didn't talk to him actually till that next May.
You didn't talk to him between September 5th and the Memorial Day time when you visited him?
No, ma'am. He might have been home one day on the phone when I called down from Santa Barbara, and I might have said hi, or I always asked how he was doing or when he was leaving, but that was the extent of our conversation until that Memorial weekend.
And if you had made those calls or talked to him during that time, that would have still been in the early part of September 1989.
Yes, between probably the 5th and the 10th.
Did you get busy with school?
Yeah, very much so.
So you didn't see him until you saw him in jail, is that right?
That is-
Overall.
That is correct.
Did she, and you didn't talk to him on the telephone during that time either?
No, ma'am.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any recross?
Mr. Whalen, you have in front of you Exhibit 215.
Yes, sir.
Looks like it's been kind of crumpled up.
Yes, sir.
Did you wad that thing up last night?
No, sir.
You found that somewhere last night?
Yes, sir. It's in one of my drawers in my room.
And you save things, correct?
I'm a pack rat. Yes, sir.
You have a good memory too, don't you?
About certain events. Yes, sir.
Do you remember when you picked up Erik Menendez from the airport, where you picked him up?
Baggage claim.
Which airline?
I said I didn't remember.
Do you remember parking at the airport?
No, I don't remember whether I just parked right outside a baggage claim or I parked in the structure. I don't remember.
If you had parked in the structure, would you have kept that parking receipt?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Overall.
No, sir.
You would not have kept that.
No, sir. Don't you have to give it back to him when you pay for it?
You can get a receipt for it.
Oh, no.
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's comment.
All right, your
Now-
next question, please.
Mr. Whalen, it wasn't hard to write that note, was it? You had a pen and you had paper right there with you? Is
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
Overall.
that correct?
It was not difficult to write that. No.
Would it have been difficult for you to write, Signorelli said you did it?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Overall.
Could you have written that?
No, it wouldn't have been difficult. No, sir.
You could have written that on the paper and shown it to Erik Menendez.
That is correct.
So he would have known what was being said.
Yes, sir.
And you indicated that you're the devil's advocate. Is that right at your school?
Yes, sir.
Now, when Craig Signorelli told you that Erik Menendez had said to him that he and Lyle had killed his parents,
Objection. The state's the witnesses.
Sustained.
did you testify that Craig Signorelli told you that Erik Menendez had told him that he and Lyle had killed their parents?
Objection, Your Honor. The state's testimony.
Overall.
Did I say in court that Craig?
Did that happen? Did Craig Signorelli tell you that?
Yes, sir.
And you found that hard to believe, is that correct?
That is correct.
Was that because Erik Menendez had told you that he was going to kill the people who had killed his parents?
I felt the whole thing was hard to believe.
Okay. Your Honor, there is one area perhaps we should approach this very briefly on.
Okay.
Mr. Whalen, after Craig Signorelli told you about what Erik had told him, you found it hard to believe. Is that correct?
I found the whole episode hard to believe. Everything that was going on.
Why did you find it hard to believe that Erik Menendez and his brother killed their parents?
Well, Your Honor, this state's testimony. It's not saying that's.
All right, we don't have clarification at this point as to what you found hard to believe, Mr. Corral.
What is it that you found hard to believe, sir?
Something that was in the media that they're this big, that hit that close to home, that people were that I just couldn't believe how close to home something like this was coming.
In particular, what you found?
The whole case, sir.
Now, let's break the whole case down into a few specifics. Can you think of anything specific that you were thinking of when you thought it was hard to believe?
All this being on TV, a good friend of mine, just nothing in particular, just the whole thing that encompassed the whole case.
Does the whole case, does that involve,
Your Honor, at
Your-
this point, I'm going to object. That's the purpose of this.
Why don't you just rephrase the question, Mr. Corral?
okay. Did you have a belief as to whether Erik and Lyle Menendez had killed their parents?
No, I at the time, no, I did not believe that
Why?
because I thought they had a good relationship with their parents from what I saw.
You saw no mistreatment?
Nope.
Did you have a particular feeling about whether or not they were abused?
Objection, Your Honor. Court's already ruled on me.
Overall.
I did not think so.
Object to this, Your Honor. I think it's improper.
Overall.
In fact, did you indicate that you thought it was a hoax?
Objection.
Overall.
In my statement?
Yes.
Yes, sir. At the time, I just didn't believe the whole case. Yes, sir.
So when Craig Signorelli told you that, you just didn't believe it.
I couldn't believe it. It was just hard for me to believe.
And you had been a good friend of Erik, and you had seen his parents come to his tennis lessons.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
You had seen his relationship with his mother.
Yes, sir.
Now, as it turns out, Craig Signorelli was correct.
Objection, Your Honor. Argument. It's for the jury to decide.
Objection sustained.
Now, you said that Craig Signorelli told you at one point that he wanted to help Erik. He wanted to say that Lyle forced Erik, correct?
That is correct.
Now, you thought that he was making up a story at that point, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you know at that point that it was Erik's idea in the first place?
Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike.
Sustained. Objection sustained to the question.
You've been watching this trial and reading in the paper about the trial, correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you read that it was
Your Honor,
Erik's idea
I'm
initially?
going to object to characterizing the testimony that way and object to what this witness heard as hearsay.
Objection sustained.
Now, you indicated that you had seen witnesses, the computer person, come in and testify, correct?
Misstates his testimony.
Well, did you see them on TV?
No, sir. I did not see them on
Did you
TV.
read about their testimony in the newspaper?
Yes, I heard the people. Yes, sir. I did.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
So you knew at that time that both Ed Heyman and Debbie Heyman had identified Craig Signorelli as the person being there.
That is correct.
And you indicated that you were gone away to school and then you went to Connecticut for a while, correct?
Correct.
And that you didn't come back until May 1990.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
But you had seen Craig Signorelli on hard copy prior to that time, correct?
Yes, sir. To me coming back to Los Angeles, that is correct.
And Craig Signorelli, according to the media, they believed he was the best friend of Erik Menendez.
Objection, Your Honor, which is what the media believes.
All right. Let's rephrase the question as it relates to this witness.
Did you actually see this hard copy segment?
Yes, sir.
Did you see Craig Signorelli on that segment?
I'd seen him and maybe it wasn't particularly hard copy, but yes, I did.
And that was prior to May of 1990?
Yes, sir.
And you weren't being shown on those programs as his best friend, were you?
No, sir.
Did you read in the paper that Ed Heyman and Debbie Heyman had seen Craig Signorelli on hard copy or one of those shows and said, that is the person that we saw?
I'm well aware of that. Yes, sir.
How are you aware of that?
How am I aware of that? They pointed out that it was Signorelli?
Yes.
From hearing something about their testimony that they were up there, that they said it was that they thought it was Signorelli who was there.
And did you read that in the paper or did somebody tell you that?
It could have been both. I know my sister's really up to date on it, so she might have told me. I might have read it.
Now, when you first testified in cross-examination about these two visits with Erik Menendez in May of 1990, you stated that you were with a friend. I believe his name was Scott.
Yes.
And then on redirect examination, you changed that and you added a couple of other people. Is that
I did
correct?
not change that.
Argumentative.
Did you alter your testimony somehow?
No, sir.
Objection, argumentative.
Yes, will stand.
No, sir.
You didn't mention any other people being there.
They asked me who I went down to see him with, and I said who I went down to see him with. It was common knowledge that Mrs. Menendez was there every day.
And these other people that you've mentioned, the girlfriends, what is it, Noelle Terleski?
Yes, sir.
Jamie Pisarczyk,
Yes, sir.
they were there as well.
The first day.
And the second day, and the first day is the day that you sent this note, this Exhibit 215?
No, sir.
It was the second day.
Yes, sir. My sister was in my presence.
And who else was in your presence?
Mrs. Menendez.
You didn't show the note to Mrs. Menendez before you showed it to Erik Menendez, did you?
It was a blank piece of paper. No, I wrote the note as I was sitting down at the desk.
I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Any regret?
Mr. Whalen, you remember when I came to your house in January of 1993 with Mr. Lader? We talked about what the defense was in this case. Recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
I told you what it was that we were going to show Mr. Menendez and Mrs. Menendez did to their children. Remember my telling you that?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember what your reaction was?
Objection, Your Honor.
Just read on that.
Well, it has to do with,
Side-
yes.
sidebar.
Mr. Whalen, let me ask you something about this interview that was conducted with you by Detective Zoller in October of 1990.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
How did the issue of abuse come up in that interview? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Did Detective Zoller bring it up?
He might have asked me the question. I don't remember.
Did he ask you if Erik had ever complained about his parents mistreating him?
Yes, he might have.
Okay. Now, did you know, Mr. Whalen, based on your knowing Erik and your knowing his parents, that they put a great deal of pressure on him?
You could sense it a little bit at the tennis matches.
Did you know that they made most of his decisions for him?
No, I wasn't aware of that side of his.
How about his decision of where to go to school?
Yeah, I knew he didn't particularly want to go to UCLA.
And do you know why it was he was going there anyway?
His father.
His father what?
He said more or less that his father was making him go to school there.
Now, you know now, do you not, Mr. Whalen, that Erik did indeed participate in killing his parents?
Yes, ma'am.
Has your opinion of him as a person changed?
No, ma'am.
You indicated that you wanted, that you went to see him because you wanted to help him.
Correct.
And are you testifying because you wanted to help him?
I'm just testifying to the facts that I know. I mean,
But you want to help him, don't you?
yes, ma'am.
You care about him, don't you?
Very much so.
And why do you care about him?
He's never been anything but a good friend to me, and I'd always stick by a friend.
Any friend?
No, but he was a particularly good friend.
Is it because of the kind of person he is that you're sticking by?
Very much so.
When you and Erik were good friends in high school, were you the kind of friends who would sit and have long talks about your innermost feelings and thoughts? Or were you more that get up and have a good time type of friend?
The latter.
The get up and have a good time.
Yes, ma'am.
At that time in your emotional development, were you very introspective and thoughtful, or were you sort of out there partying around?
No, I was, again, the latter. I was not too introspective. I was out to have a really good time.
So would it be fair to say that you didn't particularly confide in Erik and he didn't particularly confide in you?
No, ma'am. We were pretty much go out and have good time buddies.
Was there something about his relationship with Craig that seemed secretive to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Was there something about the way Craig lived his life or acted around his peers that also seemed secretive?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever know Craig Signorelli to have a girlfriend?
No, ma'am.
When he was in college, did he show any interest in girls? Did you know Erik's girlfriend?
A few of them.
Did you know Kirsten Smith?
Yeah. We knew of each other and mutual friends. And
Did you know other girls at Calabasas High School that Erik dated?
yes, ma'am.
And you've already indicated that you met Noel Terlesky at the jail.
Yes, ma'am.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Whalen, you've testified that Erik Menendez is a nonviolent person.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, yes, sir. To my knowledge. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry about that.
You did that yesterday.
Twice in 2 days. Apologize.
Now, with respect to Erik Menendez, he wanted to play football, you said yesterday, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And his parents didn't want him to do that.
Yes, sir.
They didn't want him to get hurt.
Yes, sir.
Now, did Erik Menendez tell you why his parents didn't want him to play football?
No, he just said my parents aren't going to let me play football. That was the gist of it.
And he wanted to.
Yes, sir.
Erik Menendez is taller than you, isn't he?
Yes, sir.
Strong athlete.
Yes, sir.
Would have made a pretty good football player.
Yes, sir.
Pretty aggressive.
Objection on.
Pretty aggressive.
Yes.
He was an aggressive tennis player. Yeah.
You know, playing football, you have to be pretty aggressive, don't you? Do you think that he would have been a good football player?
He would have been more of a wide receiver. That takes a lot more grace and things like that. That was the kind of caliber that Erik was.
He's big and he had speed.
He looked like he had talent and the thing it takes to be a good receiver.
Now, did you know, you testified about this friend of yours, Erik Menendez. You knew that he had committed some residential burglaries in Calabasas, correct?
Yes, sir.
You knew about that.
Yes, sir.
And it involved thousands and thousands of dollars.
Objection, Your Honor. Proper. Well, I'd like to be heard.
Rephrase the question.
Okay. It involved a great amount of property and money and jewelry, didn't it?
Yes, sir.
It's a pretty sophisticated burglary as to the second burglary, wasn't it?
Objection, Your Honor. To be heard about this entire line, given our stipulation.
All right, you may approach.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Whalen, you testified that you like to get up and have a good time when you were with Erik, correct?
Yes,
You're
sir.
not the kind that talks about things. That'd be fair to say?
Overall.
Could you clarify that question?
Yes. You and Erik didn't confide in one another. Is that correct?
Not to any deep degree. Miss Abramson said if we had long, drawn-out talks, no. We talked about various things, but nothing.
Did Erik Menendez ever tell you about the burglaries that he was involved in?
No.
You heard about that from someone else?
Yes, sir.
At some point, Erik Menendez and his family had to leave Calabasas.
Objection, Your Honor.
Rephrase the question, please.
At some point, did the Menendez family have to leave Calabasas?
Same objection.
Same question.
Do you know why the Menendezes left Calabasas?
Objection, Your Honor. This will cause a hearsay or speculation.
All right, why don't you try to pin it down with that?
Did Erik Menendez ever tell you why they had to leave Calabasas?
Objective form question again.
Overall.
No, sir. I just knew they had moved to Beverly Hills.
Now, you talked about the relationship that Craig Signorelli had with Erik Menendez, and it was much closer in terms of they were confidants of each other?
Objection, mistakes of testimony.
Overall.
Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, different than my relationship with Eric.
They would talk about things. Oh, let me ask you this. Did you know of any activities that they would collaborate on in terms of writing things?
Objection, Your Honor. Ask to approach.
Overall.
Your Honor, I'd like to.
No, this goes to a relationship of, or this witness's knowledge and relationship with Mr. Signorelli and the defendant. Objection overruled.
No, sir. Not to any great detail, no.
Well, to any detail, did you know that they were writing screenplays together?
Objection,
No, sir.
Your Honor.
Overall.
No, sir.
I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Anything else?
Did you know that Craig Signorelli was involved in the Calabasas burglaries also?
Yes, ma'am.
I have nothing further.
All right, anything else?
No, yeah.
All right, you may step down.
What should I do with this, sir?
Just leave it right there.
All right. You take my water?
You can take it. All right, your excuse subject to being recalled, however.
Yes, sir.
Your next witness?
My next witness, Your Honor, is Kathleen.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Kathleen Bulow-Cohen, Bulow-Cohen. Kathleen, Kathleen.
Is Mrs. Cohen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, but I need you to either get closer to the microphone or we'll have to, good.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Are you Casey Whalen's mother?
Yes, I am.
And do you know Erik Menendez?
Yes, I do.
Did you, in August of 1989, attend a memorial service for Erik's parents here in Los Angeles?
Yes, I did.
And at the time of that memorial service, did your son Casey make a request of you?
Yes, he did.
What did he request?
He asked that under the circumstances, would it be all right if Eric stayed with us? And I said, absolutely.
And when was it strike that, what was your understanding of when it was that Erik was going to stay with you?
Eric was going to go back to Princeton for the funeral, and then when he returned, he would be staying with us.
And do you recall approximately how long it was from the memorial service until Erik started to stay with you?
Approximately, probably 5 days to a week.
5 days to
A week.
thank you.
Sorry.
And after the day of the memorial service, do you recall any telephone calls from Erik to your home in Agoura before he returned from New Jersey?
Yes, I do.
And to the best of your understanding, were your son Casey and Erik doing some arranging for how Casey was to pick Erik up?
Yes.
And do you have in your mind's eye, in your memory, a recollection of the day when your son Casey left your home to go pick Erik up?
Yes, I do.
And was it your understanding that Casey was supposed to go to the house in Beverly Hills before he went to the airport?
Yes, it is.
And at some point that day, did you receive a telephone call from your son?
Yes, I did.
And without telling us what he said, can you describe what his demeanor was like on the phone?
Nervous. Concerned.
Did you give him advice?
Yes, I did.
Did you tell him to go to the airport?
Yes, I did.
Now, sometime subsequent to receiving that telephone call from your son, did you see Erik Menendez and your son together later that day?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall where it was that you saw them?
Well, we went for dinner.
And where did you go to dinner?
La Paz.
What is La Paz?
It's a Mexican restaurant.
Where is it?
Canoga Park. Woodland Hills.
Now, do you recall any discussion that was being conducted by Erik and or your son at dinner that night relating to anything that had happened that day?
There was some talk about a computer.
And was it Erik or Casey or both of them talking about a computer?
I don't recall.
And was it your understanding, where was this computer that they were talking about?
Are you, we can do this side.
Well, let's do it. Let me just move along and then we can go back. Was there any discussion at the dinner table? Well, strike this. Did Erik Menendez say anything at the dinner table about his brother or trying to find his brother?
Yes.
Has to go to state of mind, Your Honor.
Overall, the answer was 10.
Was there-
Yes.
And do you recall what it was Erik was saying about his brother?
He was trying to locate him. He was concerned.
Did he indicate that he didn't know where he was or that he didn't know?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
What did he indicate about his state of knowledge of Lyle's whereabouts?
He wasn't sure how to contact him. He wasn't sure exactly where he was, my understanding.
Did he indicate whether or not he understood what state Lyle was in? California, New York, New Jersey, anywhere?
I believe he did.
And do you remember now what he thought?
New Jersey.
Was there a point when you were aware that Erik was talking to his brother on the telephone?
Yes.
And do you recall when that was in relation to this dinner when Erik said he was trying to locate his brother?
It was either the next day or the day after that.
And did you overhear a conversation between Erik and his brother?
I heard Erik on the phone and he seemed upset.
And did he seem upset with Lyle?
Yes.
Do you recall what he said?
Objection close to hearsay.
Sustained.
It has to do with state of mind, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Do you recall whether or not anything was said about computers or wills in that phone conversation?
Objection hearsay.
Overall,
Yes, there was.
And would you tell us what you overheard being said on that topic?
He questioned why the will was either going to be erased or was erased.
Erik was questioning Lyle as to why the will was either going to be or was erased.
Yes.
And this is the day after your son Casey has picked Erik up at the airport.
Either the day after or the
Or the
day
day
after
after
that.
that.
Exactly.
So this is either September 2nd or 3rd. Is that correct?
Yes.
Objection leading for motion to strike and speculation.
as to what?
As to the dates.
Objection sustained, the answer is stricken.
Do you recall what date it was that your son picked Erik up at the airport?
Yes.
What date was it?
September 1st.
Now, do you know who Craig Signorelli is?
Yes, I do.
And before Erik was arrested, did you see Craig Signorelli at a football game?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall approximately what month and what year it was that you saw Craig at a football game?
Yes, I do.
And when was it?
October of 1989.
And what kind of football game was this?
My daughter was cheering and Craig Signorelli's brother was quarterbacking.
What teams?
Calabasas High School and I believe Moore Park.
And did it take place at Calabasas High School or at Moore Park?
No, Moore Park.
And did you see Craig Signorelli during the game?
Yes, I did. We sat together.
He sat next to you?
Yes.
And did you notice anything about him?
He seemed nervous. Nervous.
And did you strike up a conversation with him that had anything whatsoever to do with the Menendez family or the death of the Menendez parents
It was a topic of conversation.
between both of you?
Yes.
Were there other people there who were also conversing about it?
No, Craig and I were sitting together, so
So the two of you were discussing the fact that the Menendez parents had been killed?
yes.
And did Craig tell you something that he was doing, some project of his at that time?
Yes, he did.
And what did he tell you he was doing?
He was told me that he was involved in writing a screenplay, and that
Screenplay about, did he tell you what about?
the murder.
Excuse me?
The murder.
Of the Menendez parents?
Yes.
Okay, and what else did he say about the screenplay he was writing about their murder?
That he thought that he could sell it for a lot of money.
And did you say anything to him in relation to that?
I think I was dumbstruck.
Why were you dumbstruck?
Sustained.
Now, let's go back for a moment to when Erik came to stay with you. Approximately how long did he stay at your house?
About 10 days.
And during the time that your son Casey was still there, did Erik sleep at your house every night?
I believe all but one night.
Did your son Casey go back to school on the 5th?
Yes, he did.
And did Erik sleep there every night until after Casey left?
Yes, he did.
So one night after Casey left, Erik might not have stayed at your house overnight?
Right.
And did you notice at some point after Erik started to stay at your house that Craig Signorelli started to show up?
Yes.
And after your son left for school, did Erik seem to spend some time with Craig?
Yes.
And was it only after your son Casey left that Erik seemed to be spending time with Craig?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Mrs. Cohen,
Yes.
are you sure about that date, September 1st, or could it have been a day before or a day after?
No, I believe it was September 1st.
What makes you think that?
Well, talking with my son and my daughter, and I know that the day that my son left for school too, so counting backwards, I would say September 1st.
You would say that, but discounting anything you were told by either your son or your daughter. do
I
you
believe
have
it
a
was September
specific
1st.
recollection of the particular day?
I believe it was September 1st.
And you do that, you arrive at that date by counting back from when your son had to leave?
No, by picturing the day.
Now, were you working during that period of time?
No, I was not.
So it could have been any day during the week.
No, because I know that he was in New Jersey for the funeral, and it was planned for him to come back on a certain date. So
You know-
if the funeral was if he left Los Angeles, the 25th or 26th, I know that he was there for at least 4 or 5 days.
Do you know that the funeral was, which day the funeral was on?
At the time I did, yes.
Have you been watching the case or reading about the case at all?
Yes, I have.
Did you hear the aunt testify in this case, Teresita Baralt, that
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
I haven't heard the question yet.
Well,
The
you have to
question-
recite testimony.
Well, if it's accurately recited, it's hardly harmful, so let's hear what the question
the
is.
question is that, did you see or read in the paper that Mrs. Baralt, Jose Menendez's older sister, testified that Erik Menendez came in for just the memorial service and left the next day. He
Objection,
didn't
Your
stay
Honor.
for more than 24 hours.
Objection, Your Honor, that totally misstates Mrs. Burrell's testimony.
All right, the objection is sustained as to the form of the question. You may ask a different question, please.
Did you hear any testimony by Mrs. Burrell, Teresita Burrell?
Yes, I did.
Was it your understanding from that testimony that Erik Menendez came in for the memorial service and then left?
I didn't hear that.
Your Honor, I'm going to move to strike the question. That misstates Mrs. Burrell's testimony.
All right, objection is overruled. The answer will stand.
Getting to the statement that you told the jury about Craig Signorelli at this football game in October of 1989. Did you know at that time that Craig Signorelli had spoken to Erik Menendez about the killings of his parents?
No, I don't.
You didn't know that?
No.
You didn't know that he had information from Erik Menendez?
Object to the form
No.
of the question, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Now, in talking about this screenplay, did he give you details about the fact that he wasn't going to put in the real names of the people involved?
No.
Did you know that Craig Signorelli had a conversation with Erik Menendez that was taped on November 29th, 1989?
No, I did not.
Object to the question.
All right, she's answered no, she
How could
did
she
not.
know that?
The question has
No.
been asked and she's answered it. The question is now, does she know?
Did Craig Signorelli indicate to you that he had been collaborating with Erik Menendez on screenplays?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
What was the answer?
No.
He didn't tell you that?
No.
Did Craig Signorelli tell you that the screenplay would be based on the actual Menendez murders?
We were talking about the murders, so I believe it would follow.
And you indicated that 10 days, you believed it was about 10 days that Erik Menendez stayed at your house,
Mm-hmm.
and that he slept over all but one night that you know of.
Yes.
How long was it that you knew Erik Menendez?
Objection beyond the scope, Your Honor.
Overruled.
About 2 years.
At that point, your son had met Erik Menendez at Calabasas High School
That's correct.
in the 11th grade.
Mhm.
And you really didn't know much about Erik Menendez, I take it.
I went to his tennis matches, and he came over to the house and spent time with my sons.
Now, as far as you knew, would you check in on Erik Menendez and your son every night to make sure that they're safely in bed?
The next morning, if not that night.
The next morning you would go into the room to make sure that they were okay?
No, I was not working, so I was around the house, and so I was aware that they were in the home.
Now, Erik Menendez was about 19 years old at this time.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Mhm.
Is that yes?
Yes.
Now, you didn't know that at the age of 1.5, Erik Menendez snuck out of his house in his diapers and would go across the street to his relative's house. Did you know
No,
about that?
no.
Your Honor, I object.
All right, objection sustained.
Thank you.
You would see Craig Signorelli at your house with Erik Menendez, is that
Yes.
correct? Is there any way that you can show exactly when it was that Erik Menendez first arrived at your house?
Objection, Your Honor. Question, please.
I believe it could be done.
Objection overruled. The answer will stand.
How do you think it can be done?
I can go back possibly and look at, I usually keep calendars. I believe I threw that year out, but I can go back and look at telephone bills or whatever.
Okay. For 1989.
Believe so.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. May step down. You're excused. Your next witness.
Katie Whalen.
All right. How long do you think this testimony will be?
I think it's going to take us past the hour, and I'm not supposed to go past the hour.
All right. That witness come back on Tuesday?
Yes, you can.
Okay, then we'll resume on Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen, at 1:30. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. Before I excuse you, let me go through the same questioning I've done with you in the past. And let me ask whether or not any of you have seen or heard anything about this case outside of the courtroom other than what you've already told me.
No, sir.
Okay. All right, then let's keep it that way. Don't look at any of the news coverage. Don't permit yourself to be in any situation where anything about this case is discussed or in any way presented to you. And don't form any final opinions about it. There's still more evidence to be heard, and you have to wait until you hear everything before you formulate your final opinions about this case. And all of you have a good and safe weekend, and we'll see you all back here on Tuesday at 1:30.
You're a soccer coach from 1978.
That was not in front of, because it was.
A swimming coach for Erik Menendez named Meredith Geisler, who coached Erik from 1980 to 1981. We put on tennis coach Charles Wadlington, who coached the defendants from 1981 to 1985. They put on 3 teachers, Janet Stoltzfus, who was defendant's teacher at PBS in the 9th grade in Bible class. We put on Sandra Sharp from PBS, who was the defendant's Spanish teacher, and put on Barbara Zussman, who taught the defendant in an English class at Beverly Hills High School. That's 3 teachers and 3 coaches. They intend to put on math tutor today and another teacher from PBS in 1985, from the 1985 class that Erik Menendez took.
8586.
In addition, they intend to put on Leslie Elmore, who apparently saw something that occurred at a swimming lesson in 1982, which I believe has been testified to already by Meredith Geisler, the swimming coach.
All right, and the defense wish to respond?
Well, I'd like to respond with respect to Leslie Elmore, Your Honor. Mr. Kuriyama is in error. The incidents that Leslie Elmore, who was a student, not a coach, not a teacher, but a co-student of the Menendez brothers, and her family were members of the Beatonsburg Country Club, as were the Menendezes. Her observations are of, and let me just say, as you can see from the statements, this is very brief testimony in any event. Her observations are Kitty Menendez drilling and coaching and pressuring Erik with respect to swimming, and there's been no testimony about that whatsoever from anybody. And what we're trying to show with this testimony is that Kitty Menendez was placed as much pressure on Erik and was as unfeeling and critical of him with respect to this sport activity as was his father. And I think that's an important point in this case because I think the prosecution has tried to style Kitty as just a victim of Jose and a passive part of the family picture, and it is our position that she was an active abuser, just as Jose was, and active on many fronts in her psychological and ultimately we will show physical abuse of Erik. So that's where Leslie Elmore fits in. And as I said, it's a one-page report. It didn't take very long to describe what it is she saw. She's the only person available to us. There are 2 other witnesses. Had Ms. Elmore not come in, there were 2 other witnesses, similarly situated, other youngsters who were part of the Beatonsburg swim team, who made observations of Kitty similar to Ms. Elmore's, and we didn't call them in because to do that we felt would have been cumulative. So she was our only witness on that point.
Your Honor, with respect to Barbara Howarth.
Who were those other 2 witnesses that you could have called?
They're not on the witness list, but one of them is called Elizabeth Phylum. And what was the other girl's name?
I can get it.
All right, well, never mind, they were not on the witness list, okay.
No, we just wanted one witness for this point.
All right, yes.
With respect to Barbara Howard, she is the last teacher that we intend to call from about Erik. She taught him in 9th grade at PDS. She taught him an English class. She will testify as to her efforts to communicate with the parents via comments about Erik's performance and the lack of any specific response to the parents, on the part of the parents rather, to the problems that she raised. She will also testify briefly as to Erik's performance in class and his crying when things didn't go well or when there was a test. She will also testify to an incident that occurred around the same time of the incident that Janet Stolfus testified to, but it was a separate and distinct incident in which Erik copied from a World Book Encyclopedia for an oral report, and there was a conference with the parent following that incident. Able to give the jury a picture of Erik closer in time to the event at issue, since he stopped tutoring him in June of 1989, which was just 2 months before the parents died.
Your Honor, I should indicate to the court, and I'm sure the court is not going to be happy hearing it, but it is clear to us that if the court allows all of this testimony, it's not going to take longer than an hour to put all 3 witnesses on. And
What you're
unfortunately,
saying is I'll be unhappy to hear that you won't have anybody else.
yes, you will be unhappy to hear that.
Why is that?
Excuse me?
Why is it that you won't have anyone else?
Because the only other people who we could have called out were for the Erik Menendez jury only, because that's the only jury here this afternoon, simply could not come in until tomorrow morning. There were 2 other also brief witnesses, I might add, that are coming in tomorrow morning, and there was no one else that was Erik Menendez only until after Erik testifies. And that's how we structured this afternoon, so.
Well, when did you learn all of this?
When did we learn?
Yeah, did you learn
Over the week.
it? You didn't know it before we excused the other jury until tomorrow.
No, because we excused the other jury, Your Honor, on Thursday. And some of the scheduling of additional Erik Menendez only witnesses occurred on Friday. For example, Katie Whalen, I didn't even know would be a witness until Friday, and I wanted to get her back for today, but she had an exam or something in one of her classes and can only be here tomorrow morning. And Doug Doss was out of town, and I didn't hear from him until late Friday afternoon when he came back, and he's another witness for tomorrow morning, and he couldn't be here this afternoon because he had lessons scheduled.
All right, well, I'm sure the personal problems of these witnesses are significant, but the progress of this trial is more significant to me. And we have lost several days so far here, and we're very slowly getting back into the swing of this trial, and it's very slow going at this point. The defense indicated to the court that it would present to the court a list of all your witnesses and the schedule in which you expect to have them called. I have yet to receive that, although you were supposed to have given it to me this morning.
Your Honor,
Actually, last week. you were
yes,
supposed
I
to.
believe that was to be provided by noon on Friday, and we were in court, and Ms. Lansing's office faxed us a copy of what I had thought had been faxed to you.
Never received it. They did file another motion in the afternoon, which I did receive, but I did not receive any witness list.
I have it as well.
Well, why don't you give it to the clerk?
Let me just make sure that this is what it's supposed to be. Yes. Did you see this?
No.
All right, give it to me now so I can just briefly look at it. What is your plan, intention as far as witnesses tomorrow?
We have two brief Erik Menendez witnesses, Doug Doss and Katie Whalen. And then we have Dr. Cox coming in and I suppose we're going to litigate.
That was supposed to be today.
No, he couldn't come in just today.
No, the litigation was supposed to be today.
Does the other team know that?
They filed a motion dated for hearing today at 9 o'clock, so I assume they knew.
Your Honor, I told the court we would have a reply to that motion. We were not served with it until late on Friday, and we don't have a reply because we were promised it in the morning on Friday, and we didn't get it.
Well, I can just tell you right now that my inclination is to rule that any of those witnesses, if they are to testify at all, would testify after the defendant's testimony. I don't find it at this point to be relevant evidence unless and until the defendants testify and meets the criteria set forth in the papers filed by the defense as to why you would call these witnesses. So as I told Ms. Lansing and Mr. Burt, that my intention is if they run out of other witnesses, Lyle Menendez will be the next witness.
Well, I think we should tell them, Your Honor, how you're viewing this today.
Well, I told them last week that was how I would proceed. This is no secret.
Well, I know, but I mean, they hadn't filed the pleading at the point of that discussion, if I remember it.
Well, the tenor of the pleading, you can relate this to them is, and I don't intend to invite a lot of argument to refute what I'm saying, but the tenor of their pleading is that all that evidence is offered to corroborate the testimony of the defendants and wouldn't be relevant unless the defendants testified. So
I think the other theory was that it's also relevant to show the opinion, testimony vis-a-vis character of the victims in order to explain their conduct.
well, their conduct is unknown at this point and will only be known once the defendants testify.
But I think vis-a-vis their conduct in raising the children.
That's irrelevant unless and until the defendants put in issue those things that they say, well, they'll put in issue by their testimony. Court has been rather lenient in permitting the defense to put on all sorts of evidence regarding the victim's character without objection by the prosecution, I might note, prior to the testimony of the defendants. But at some point, the case has to get back to the events of August 20th, 1989, and the defense indicates that do that by the testimony of the defendants, and the court feels that the next portion of this case should be just that.
We need to spend some time litigating that issue, Your Honor. It's very hard to prepare the defendants to testify, which is what we spent the better part of the weekend doing, obviously, without knowing who they're testifying in front of, what's the scope of impeachment, what kinds of prior acts under 352 that the court already ruled on now are allowable. And if Dr. Cox, who is scheduled to be the main witness tomorrow, is not going to be permitted to testify tomorrow, then I think we should litigate that issue before Lyle takes the witness.
I would have been prepared to do that today. I kind of thought that the parties would have actually filed some documents with the court setting forth their positions, since this is an issue that could have been anticipated. The defense has already stated preliminarily, at least Erik Menendez's defense, its view as to whether Lyle Menendez should testify before the Erik Menendez jury.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a final position of the defense or not. I don't know what the position is of Lyle Menendez versus Erik Menendez testimony. These are all things that counsel, I'm sure, have given great thought to prior to getting to this stage of the proceedings, and I'm sure he gave great thought to prior to the commencement of trial. Yeah. And that counsel probably have a brief that could be filed in that regard.
Well, I think we do have one that's just been written. We weren't holding one in our hip pocket, but.
Well, Your Honor, also the issues.
Have you talked to Michael? Do you know where it is?
No, I have no idea, Michael. But the issues presented by the prospect of, for example, Lyle testifying in front of Erik's jury are essentially raised in the motions that we filed regarding the admissibility of statements. And it's just that they just are posed in a different way because it becomes difficult, impossible for us to effectively cross-examine Lyle on points that are necessary to bring out in Erik's defense. For example, Erik's fear of him and the basis for that. We can't do that. I don't expect that Lyle's attorneys would permit us to do that in front of their jury. So that the issues raised are I think, fairly clear and have been isolated for the court on prior occasions.
Well, I think what we previously briefed was, if I might be heard as well, Your Honor, I know there's no doing whatever, but I'd like to be heard anyway. Ma'am?
I don't see a reason to do this now, since there are other parties who will have input as well. The people filed a brief today that had something to do with Miranda Bruton. I haven't read it, but I assume that could relate to this issue that we're discussing. I really haven't. It was just filed this afternoon. I haven't read it. But I would expect that if there is any brief to be filed by the defense, it gets filed with sufficient time for the court to evaluate it prior to the hearing. If there is nothing to be filed in addition to what you've already filed, then we'll just proceed by way of oral argument. But these issues are all things that I'm sure, as I said, counsel have thought of and should be prepared to respond to prior to the testimony of either defendant.
It's my understanding that Mr. Burt was preparing a pleading having to do with the defendants not testifying in front of each other's jury. And I know some of the issues that he was going to address, which were issues that concerned me, was the problem of separation of evidence that has occurred thus far in the trial.
Well, I would suggest that if you have that concern and if there is a prospect, I don't know what the people's position is as to whether one defendant should be over objection of the other defendant should be compelled to testify before both juries. I don't know what their position is. They indicated preliminarily what it was, but I don't know what their final view is. If that is their position, then my suggestion is that counsel sit down and write out a list of all those things that you feel have been presented to one jury and not the other jury, all those things that you feel might not have been presented to either jury, but might fall within Section 352 of the Evidence Code if brought out during the examination of a defendant, so that these matters can be intelligently discussed before the testimony of either defendant. But this is a substantial issue and one that should be addressed by all parties, and one that I feel is now germane, that we're at that stage of the trial. I don't feel that calling Dr. Cox and others who may have treated Mrs. Menendez at this point would produce relevant evidence unless and until the defendants testify and put in issue those things that the testimony of these other witnesses might relate to. Yes. Yeah.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Yes, people wish to be heard.
Yes, Your Honor, it's the people's position that the defendants should testify in full in front of both juries, so there's no mistake with that position. I wanted to know in receipt of our response filed today to the defense opposition to the 1016 motion.
I received that this morning.
Thank you. And also the court is in receipt of our motion to recall the defendant, which I think was filed approximately August the 16th or thereabout, which talks about once a defendant testifies, he waives certain privileges.
I did receive that as well.
All right.
What is the people's, just generally so that you can inform the court, what is your view as to when and how one defendant would testify before the other defendant's jury over the objection of the other defendant? Would that happen during the initial testimony of that defendant, the people would call that witness out of order, or how would it occur?
Well, it's our, Your Honor, I think there are really two issues involved with the separation of juries. One is the Aranda Bruton issue, and one is the 352 issue. We originally had two juries because of the Aranda Bruton problems, and also there were issues or items of evidence which we felt might be precluded if we proceeded with one jury because of their prejudicial effect as to one defendant versus the probative value to another.
Well, ultimately, that was why two juries were used in this case. The court indicated that if we proceeded with one jury, the prosecution ran the risk that certain evidence would not be admissible in a joint trial with one jury that might be admissible in separate trials with two juries.
Correct.
And the people didn't want to run that risk and elected to go with two juries.
Correct. And the analysis of the defendant's testimony, I think that the Aranda Bruton issue is pretty much resolved in our favor. That is, any statements made by one defendant who testifies can be placed in front of the other defendant's jury, because now that the defendant is testifying, there's no confrontation problem. And Mr. Kuriyama filed that brief today.
Okay.
The only issue.
I don't want to get into the argument because there is the other defendant
Right.
who has his views and wants to be heard and wants to hear what you're saying as well. So I don't want to get into the details. I just wanted to know when it was, or what posture of the case would it be that the people would propose to have the other defendant testify before the other jury.
When he's called by the defense. In other words, that the defendant should testify on direct examination, called by his attorney in front of both juries. Now, the reason that I made reference to the motion to recall the defendant is the specter that the people would have the right. Let's say Erik Menendez took the stand only in front of his jury. On issues germane to Lyle Menendez, the people, as our position, would have the right to call Erik Menendez in front of Lyle Menendez's jury, because this is one proceeding. And by taking the stand and testifying, that defendant has waived the privileges outlined in section 930 and 940. So it's our position that the defendants should testify on direct examination in front of both juries. Now, ultimately, the court may conclude that there are certain matters whose probative value is outweighed by their prejudicial effect as to the co-defendant's jury. And those are the 352 issues. For instance, a piece of evidence might be germane in front of Erik Menendez's jury, but the court may find that it's too prejudicial to Lyle Menendez's jury, and that the conclusion of that testimony or the cross-examination should only occur in front of the jury for that defendant. But it's our position that the direct and almost the entirety of the cross, if not the entire cross, should be conducted in front of both juries.
Okay, you've answered my question. So we'll discuss this when the other counsel are present as well. As I said, I want counsel, and I have to believe you already done this, but if you haven't,
Be surprised.
list all those things that fall within these categories that I've indicated. The evidence introduced to one jury and not the other, or those matters that fall within section 352 of the evidence code, or potentially do that have not been introduced as to either jury. You know what they are. These are matters that were subject to motions filed earlier. And as far as a hearing of these matters, that would be part of the overall issue that would be discussed. Yes.
I'm just trying to get a sense, Judge, of how you want to proceed with that litigation, some space in which to, I know we have a rough list and we could get it into type form by tomorrow, but I don't know how to contact, well, I do know how to contact co-counsel, because I know where one of them at least is at the jail right now, working with her client, getting ready. But how do you want to schedule this so that we can pursue these matters, litigate these matters?
Well, you say you have a couple short witnesses tomorrow morning.
But I can move them
They
around.
can be dealt with as needed. As far as the Lyle Menendez jury is concerned, you'll have to refresh my recollection. Did we tell them to come back tomorrow at 9 or at 1:30?
Yes, 9.
9, but they want to be off in the afternoon, if the court will recall,
Yeah.
Well, one juror did.
Yeah. on that jury.
Yeah. And let's see how we proceed here, and we'll set aside time to deal with the matter. And you can, at a recess, notify your co-counsel to be here tomorrow, tentatively in the morning, and so that if not the morning, in the afternoon, we'll be able to deal with this matter.
Right.
But you should definitely notify them to be prepared to address the issue, and you can give them an indication of my tentative ruling in regards to the brief that was filed today, for today's hearing, rather.
Since Dr. Cox is a witness for tomorrow, we really need to figure out to put him on hold, I guess.
Well, I'm
on call.
telling you right now that that's my view, that those three witnesses are witnesses who really don't have any relevant evidence unless and until the defendants testify. So that's how I'm going to proceed with the matter. So let's go back to the objections to the witnesses this afternoon. Are there going to be any other witnesses testifying regarding athletic endeavors of Erik Menendez?
There's one other tennis coach who is from 1988, 89. There's been no reason, there were no tennis. It's a gentleman named Doug Doss, who's a witness who's on for tomorrow.
Are there any other school witnesses, teachers, counselors, tutors, anything else?
No.
All right, in regards to those witnesses on today's schedule then, although some of them might be repetitive on certain issues, the description of the swimming activities, as I recall, it did relate to Lyle Menendez rather than, or as to the father, not the mother. And that as far as these other two witnesses, I would direct counsel to be pinpoint in your examination of the witnesses rather than to start from scratch and lay all the foundation that you did with the other witnesses and get to the point that you want to bring out rather than all the other peripheral matters that have been brought out with other witnesses. All right, anything else now then before the jury? And I do recognize there were objections filed by the prosecution as to at least one witness, extensive objections as to evidentiary matters, and those things can be dealt with as the witness testifies. I assume counsel will try to bring out many of those things anyway.
Yeah, there was already some agreement with
Right.
that.
Okay, let's get the jury out.
Your Honor, may I have the court's witness list so I can run down and Xerox it? I don't have a copy.
Sure. All right, why don't you get a copy from the defense counsel? You don't have any extras? Oh, okay. Okay, sure.
Okay, ready to go.
Okay, we have all the jurors present in court, and good afternoon. Welcome back. And we're ready to resume with the trial. The defense may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would call Leslie Elmore. Leslie Simone Elmore. 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 It probably works best with someone to turn this way.
This way?
Yeah,
Just face the lawyer.
Okay.
right. And that way your mouth is facing.
Yeah, please spell your middle name for us.
Simone, Simonne.
Ms. Elmore, what's your occupation?
I'm a paramedic,
And where do you work?
Buncombe County EMS.
And what state is that?
Excuse me, what can
Buncombe County,
And where is Buncombe County?
North Carolina.
How do you spell that?
Buncombe, Buncombe.
Okay.
And where were you raised?
Princeton, New Jersey.
When you were growing up in Princeton, did
you
you
attend the Princeton Day School?
Yes, I did.
And was that for your entire education or just for part?
From first grade through senior year in high school.
And did your family have a membership in a country club called Beedensbrook?
Yes, I did.
And did you, along with your siblings, attend Beedensbrook?
Yes, I did.
Now, what is your mother's name?
Charlene Elmore.
And did she have a position at Princeton Day School?
She was a school nurse.
Did you know, on some level, Erik Menendez when you were growing up in Princeton?
Yes, I knew his brother was in my class in high school.
His brother Lyle was in your class?
Yes.
Erik was never in your classes?
No.
How old are you, Miss Elmore?
24.
And Erik was younger than you?
Yes.
Did you know when you were growing up in Princeton how much younger Erik was than you?
I'd say probably 2 years.
Now, turning your attention to the Beedensbrook Country Club, In the summertime, did that country club have a swim program for the children of the members?
Yes, they had a swim team.
And did you participate in that?
Yes, I did.
Were there times of the day when the children who were part of the swim team would be required to practice?
Usually either in the morning or in the afternoon.
Were there two separate practice sessions?
Yes,
set
there
up?
were.
And did you practice?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, in, say, the period between 1980 and 1982, was Erik a member of the swimming team?
Yes.
And did he practice?
He practiced by himself most of the time, with his mother coaching him.
Did he also practice? Well, how did you practice? By yourself with your mother coaching?
No, I practiced.
Sustain.
Did the other children practice as a group?
Yes, they practiced. They were coached by the swim team coach.
Was one of those coaches a young woman named Meredith Krugman?
Yes.
And did Erik practice with the group as well?
I don't recall if he practiced with us or not. He was younger than I and would have swam with a different group.
Did the groups practice at different times, the age groups?
No, you could either swim in the morning or afternoon, but they didn't separate the age groups.
Okay. Now, you say did you observe Erik in practices with his mother?
Yes, I did.
And was she teaching him how to swim? Was she in the pool with him or what?
No, she was along the side of the pool, running up and down the side of the pool, asking him or telling him to hurry up, you have to swim faster. Often she had a stopwatch when she was doing so.
Were there other parents doing the same thing at the same time?
No.
Did you, in fact, ever see another parent doing that?
No.
And was this on one occasion that you saw Mrs. Menendez running by the up and down the side of the pool with the stopwatch, or was it more than once?
No, I saw her on several occasions doing it.
And I take it you and other members, other children who were members of the club were around when she would be doing that with Erik.
Mm-hmm. Usually, after our practice ended, Erik would still be in the water swimming, and Mrs. Menendez was there on the side of the pool.
Did you see Erik on a daily basis at the swimming pool at Beedensbrook during the summers?
I'd say I probably saw him several times a week.
And did you, apart from seeing his mother doing this, I guess was she timing him?
With the stopwatch, yes.
Apart from seeing her in that activity, was she just ever at the pool with him, like in a recreational way, just?
Not that I recall.
Now, you heard her telling him what when she was running up and down the side of the pool?
She would be shouting at him to hurry up, you're not swimming fast enough, you're never going to beat Rob Bergman. And Rob was, an excellent swimmer, and Erik was not even in the same age group with him.
Was Rob like the star of Beedensbrook swim?
Yes, he was.
And how much older? I take it he was older than Erik?
He's probably 2 or 3 years older.
And did you see, first of all, how many times would Erik have to swim and be timed by her in any given session? Do you know?
I wouldn't be able to count those times. I saw it happening several times.
What I'm saying is, would she just time him on one lap, or did he have?
No, in one occasion, he would do it several times. She would time him and keep telling him he had to go faster.
And were there any occasions when you saw some sort of emotional reaction on Erik's part to this behavior by his mother?
Yes, there was one instance where Erik had swam a lot that day and was cold, and he had gotten out of the pool and was standing with his hands together, clutching his arms to his side, saying he was cold, and Mrs. Menendez saying he had to get back in the pool and swim faster in order to beat Rob.
And did you see any reaction on Erik's part besides appearing to be cold?
He was almost to the point of tears.
And were there other kids around at that time within, say, hearing distance of what his mother was saying?
Yes.
Did Mrs. Menendez have any equipment that she would bring to these solo practices that she conducted with Erik?
A stopwatch.
What is a kickboard?
A kickboard is a flotation device that we use in the pool just to practice our kicking, get stronger on our kicking, and we wouldn't use our arms.
Did you ever see her having Erik use that kind of object while she was training?
Yes, I did.
Did you ever see her swim, by the way?
No.
Did you ever see her even in a swimsuit when she would be conducting these sessions?
No,
Roll the answer, will stand.
I did not. She often wore.
You've answered the question.
Okay, can you describe what she was wearing?
Objection is irrelevant.
Sustain.
Did she have clothes that looked like trainers' clothes, like the kinds of things coaches would wear?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustain.
Did you ever observe in these practice sessions Erik arguing with his mother or refusing to do what she asked him to do?
No.
Did you see him appear to be cold or say that he was cold on other occasions than the one you've described?
I remember that incident well because it was emotional for him and it embarrassed me and some of the other kids who were at the pool.
So it was, from what you could see, it was noticed by the other kids?
Yes.
Did Erik have any friends that you saw him with at that pool?
No, not really.
And were there times that you'd be there all day and he'd be there all day and he'd be by himself?
There were times that I was there all day and Erik may or may not have been. He wasn't, unless his mother was there, I usually didn't notice him.
Okay. He was sort of invisible?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a group of friends that were at the club that you associated with on the days that you would be there?
Yes.
Objection irrelevant.
Roll the answer, will stand.
Were there various sort of cliques of kids of different age
Yes.
groups?
Mhm.
There were a lot of children at the pool over the course of the summer,
Yes.
weren't there? Do you know why it is that you remembered this particular behavior of Mrs. Menendez so many years later?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustain.
Were there always coaches available at the Beedensbrook school?
Yes, there were.
On the days that you would see Mrs. Menendez there, were those days that the coaches had been there and were training the children?
Yes.
Did you ever see Lyle Menendez at Beedensbrook?
Yes, I did, but he mostly played tennis and he would have to wait before he come down to the pool after he played.
And would you see Lyle playing tennis? Could you see the tennis courts from the pool?
Yes.
But did you ever see Erik and Lyle together over the course of an entire day at Beedensbrook?
During the entire day, no. They were together, throughout the day periodically, but not usually together the whole day.
Would Lyle come down from the tennis courts to the pool from time to time?
Yes.
Now, based on what you observed, did you think that Mrs. Menendez just wanted what was best for her son, Erik?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Did she appear to be a concerned parent to you?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Could you characterize the way she spoke to Erik when she was there with him during these swim practices?
She was loud and often raised her voice at him, shouting at him.
Did you ever hear her praise his performance or praise anything he was doing?
No. Not that I remember.
Did you ever hear her make any statements specific to how much time he had to, that he would have to complete a lap, or how much time he had to shave off or save in order to be a better swimmer?
Tenths of seconds. It wasn't much time.
What did you hear her say in that regard?
That he had to hurry up. He had to go faster in order to beat Rob. And
Did she say anything about you've got to shave off X amount of time or anything like that?
not that I remember specifically what the times were, but she did say that he had to hurry up.
From your observations of Erik at the pool, and I take it you also made observations of him at meets and, for the swim team. Let me ask you this. Did you enjoy swimming?
Yes.
Overall.
What would you say about Erik? Did he appear to enjoy swimming?
Overall, you can answer the question.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
He did during the meets. I mean, I think all kids enjoyed being at the meets because it was a competition and something for them to do.
What about at other times?
When he was practicing, I don't think he enjoyed that.
When he was practicing with his mother, or when he was practicing with the team, or both?
With his mother, particularly.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
You have a motion?
Yes.
I have no questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down. You're excused. Your next.
Would you tell us your full name, spell your last name?
Barbara Howarth, Howarth.
Mrs. Howarth, what is your occupation?
I'm a teacher. I teach English at Princeton Day School.
And how long have you been a teacher?
I've been teaching for a little over 30 years, about 21 of them at the day school.
Now, directing your attention to the years 1985 to 1986, did you have Erik Menendez in an English class at Princeton Day School?
Yes, I did. I taught 9th grade English that year.
And was that a class that met 4 days a week?
Yes.
About how long would each class last?
They would vary. Some classes were 40 minutes, others were 55, depending on the day of the week.
And in addition to the class session, did you have a regular time where you met one-to-one with Erik?
Yes, I meet with all my students once every 2 weeks for at least 15 minutes. If they'd like more conference time than that, we can set that up.
Now, this was a class that began in the fall of 1985 and ended in the summer of 1986.
That's correct.
And during the course of those months that you taught Erik Menendez, would you grade him?
Yes, the students were graded 4 times a year officially, and at the end of each marking period, we would write a comment as well as a grade.
And have you had an opportunity to review your comments for Erik Menendez during 1985 and 1986?
Yes, I have.
May I approach, Your Honor, with Exhibit 197?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm showing you a packet of documents that have been tabbed. Do those appear to be Princeton Day School records about Erik Menendez?
Yes, they are.
Now, in addition to the 4 comments, is there something called an interim report that you might make about a student?
And in the middle of every marking period, there's a possibility for an interim. There's also a possibility at any other time during the marking period when there was particular concern about an individual student. Not every student would get an interim.
Now, directing your attention to October of 1985, did you prepare an interim report about Erik Menendez?
Yes, I did.
And at the time you prepared that report, how long had he been in your class?
He had been in the class for about 1 month. At that time, a month and a half, and I was concerned about his performance. So even though I did not worry that he was going to fail the course, I wanted to call to the parents' attention the fact that he was having difficulties more than normal.
What sort of difficulties was he having?
Erik had trouble meeting assignment deadlines. He often misunderstood the directions for assignments. He sometimes did not do well on quizzes, especially pop quizzes that were unannounced. He seemed to have trouble keeping track of when the class met. The class did not meet at the same time every day. And for my particular class, we did not even meet in the same place every day. I used a computer room for some writing and the classroom. And Erik was frequently late because he had gone somewhere else instead.
Do you have any particular example in mind when you say that he had difficulty following instructions?
Yes, he would have, it would run the whole gamut of types of things that he had trouble with. Some were as mundane as proper heading on a paper, or even remembering to put his name on a paper. Other times he would, if the instructions were to include 3 characters in the examples that he brought into the assignment, he would only have 1 or 2. And it didn't seem to matter whether I would often hand out written instructions and then go over them orally, or have students read and question the instructions. And even with that double enforcement, he would not understand.
Was Erik a particularly anxious student that you, is that something that you noticed during the first month that you taught him?
I mentioned that in the first interim and in several others, and in several other comments. He was anxious about, clearly anxious about grades. He would, I would refer to it as his having something that was getting in his way, and I didn't know what.
Mrs. Howarth, was there ever any contact made by either of Erik's parents regarding the interim report that you made that was in October of 1985?
No, there was not. They did not respond directly to any of the comments that I made throughout the year.
Okay. You mean they didn't call you or try and talk to you about what you had written about their son?
That's correct. They didn't ask for a conference. Parents often call on the phone when something goes home. They did not call. I never met Mr. Menendez.
Let me ask you, did you see Mrs. Menendez at the school?
Yes, she was frequently at school, especially toward the end of the day. And she would be sort of waiting around, I assumed, to take the boys. They had a very busy schedule. And she would often be either just outside the classroom or she would come into the classroom to look at the bulletin boards at the end of the day.
Was that when the children were there, when they had left?
It was often just as class was being dismissed, and usually students hang around, sometimes to talk about important things, sometimes just to hang around.
And did Mrs. Menendez, when she was there after school, ever say to you, well, what about the interim report?
No, she did not. She would, however, tell me about Erik, tell me that he was studying much harder, that she thought that he was getting better at problems that he had in English, that he was enjoying English so much this year. I sometimes felt that she was directing what my next comment should say, but she did not ask me about specifics in previous comments.
You said that she was directing, you felt that she was directing what your next comments should say, meaning what?
Meaning that in her view, he was getting better and spending more time at English, which was going to improve his performance.
Okay, and did you, as his teacher, observe any such behavior on Erik's part?
Not anything consistent. Erik was very good at some areas of English. I don't think he realized that he was good at those. He tended to see his weaknesses rather than his strengths. And many times it was his strengths were in non-graded areas, discussion, for example. So he would not get the feedback, the immediate feedback that he would get on written work, on tests, on quizzes.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned in your comments, I believe it was the one in June of 1986, was that Erik, there seemed to be a panic or a block operating with Erik.
Objection, reading.
Rephrase the question, please.
Did you ever see a panic or a block operating on Erik that interfered with his learning?
My comments indicate that I was concerned because something was getting in his way. He seemed, especially toward the end of the marking periods when grades were about to be officially declared, he seemed very anxious. In our conferences, when he was trying to come up with paper topics, I had thought that perhaps things were just too structured, and that if I gave him more leeway to come up with things on his own, that he would be more relaxed. But that would, when I would try open-ended assignments with the class, Erik, in his conference time, would need a lot of help and reinforcement to get what it was he wanted to write about clarified. He saw everything as potential. He seemed to see everything as potential danger. He did not distinguish between a quiz or a test or a major paper. Everything was the same level of importance. He didn't have a very good sort of sense of where he was or the connectedness as far as procedure.
Did Erik have any basic skill problems that you noticed?
Yes, he in writing, he is a terrible speller, worse than I am. He had a great deal of trouble with end punctuation, which is not usual for a ninth grader. He just didn't know. He would write numerous sentence fragments, run-on sentences using a comma instead of a period, which is a little bit more common. Other punctuation was just, he couldn't get a hold of it. had some problems in sequencing. There seemed to be problems in his processing material that was raised in class discussion, although he himself was good at class discussion. But drawing together the information from his classmates in an organized way, or things that I would say, something broke down.
Did you notice that Erik had any problems concentrating?
Yes, there would be, if the discussion was very rapid, and if people only said a little bit and it moved quickly, he was right there and following. But if either I talked too long or one of the other students talked too long, he would seem to drift away. And then in some days, he seemed preoccupied.
What do you mean by talk too long? Talk for an hour?
No, the class is only 40 minutes. 3, 4, 5 minutes. And some students and some teachers do that.
Okay. What about Erik's self-confidence level?
As a ninth grader, it was very low. He, as I say, I don't think he realized what his strengths were. I think he was very concerned about how he was doing and measuring himself every minute, but not feeling that he was doing as well as he should have been doing.
Now, was there a particular behavior that you noticed on Erik's part before testing?
Yes. If it were a test that he knew was summarizing an entire book, or if he were asked to take a quiz for which he knew he was not prepared, he would become very upset and he would cry.
Okay. And that would be in class?
Yes.
Was that unusual for a ninth grade boy to cry in class?
Yes, it's very unusual. Some ninth grade boys who are under the same or under similar stress situations will either be angry, explode in anger, or will leave the room. But most ninth grade boys do not cry, especially in front of their peers.
And what about when Erik received a poor grade? Would that also prompt him to cry?
Yes, and so what I tried to do in that, I assumed it was kind of embarrassment because no matter what a teacher.
That's, it relates to speculation.
All right, the objection is sustained. Everything after yes is stricken as non-responsive. Your next question, please.
Thank you. Did you do anything as a result of Erik's crying when he got a poor grade?
Yes, I would give him his papers back either before or after class. He was not the only one who would get his paper back then, so I didn't feel that I was shifting the spotlight and putting him in a different spotlight. Good students would get their papers back, some weaker students.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about an incident that happened towards the end of the school year. What did you assign the class an oral report to do?
Yes, the last 2 books we did were The Grapes of Wrath and Cry the Beloved Country. And every student was to give a 2 to 4 minute oral report on some aspect of the author, something having to do with the book. Erik was to do something on Cry the Beloved Country, which was probably in the last 3 weeks of school.
And did Erik, in fact, give an oral report on Cry the Beloved Country?
Yes, he did.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
All right, I assume you're getting to the point here. If
Yes,
you can expedite that, please.
Was there anything unusual about his performance?
Again, he had not followed directions. The report was supposed to be 2 sources and in note form on note cards from which he was to speak to the rest of the class. Instead, Erik's report, he read his report from note cards, and the vocabulary was, he had trouble pronouncing some of the words. He didn't seem to understand what was behind some of the sentences. And so I felt it was not his own work.
Okay. And did you, at some point, discover a book with the same oral report that Erik had given?
Yes, he had copied it word for word from the World Book.
Right. Now, as a result of this incident, did you have a meeting with Erik and with his mother?
Yes, his mother, Erik Sanford Bing, who was the head of the upper school at that time, and I met in Mr. Bing's office about the oral report.
And at the conference that you had with Mrs. Menendez, did you show her Erik's note cards and then the World Book Encyclopedia?
Yes, not immediately. She started the conference. She was angry at me. She said I had been picking on Erik all year, that I was unfair to Erik, that Erik would not do anything like that, what I had said. She was a very difficult woman to interrupt, and I tried several times to say, wait, I have something to show you. Mr. Bing said, let's start this again. And I had the assignment sheet which explained what Erik was to have done. I had the World Book. I had his note cards.
And did you show her these things?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did her attitude towards this change after you showed her these things?
Yes. She looked at it very quickly and then turned on Erik and was upset with him, which was not unusual if a parent is embarrassed about.
Okay, well, you're going beyond the question.
Okay.
Don't tell us what other people did.
Let me
All
ask you another question. What specifically did Mrs. Menendez say to Erik?
She said that how could he do this to the family name? How could he lower this family honor and bring disgrace upon the family? Which to my mind was not the point.
Okay,
And
yes, answer the question.
All right. But she spoke about the family name and family honor.
That's correct.
And may I just have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Was she very angry?
She continued her criticism for quite a while. I would characterize it as angry.
And how did you react when Mrs. Menendez became angry and started speaking to Erik about the family honor?
Objection.
Sustain.
What did you do when Mrs. Menendez began saying these things to Erik?
Objection irrelevant.
Asking what did she say in
Yes.
this group meeting? You can answer that question.
I
No, just what did you say, if anything?
Okay. I said that what I wanted Erik to see was that not following directions could get him in serious trouble. That if he were taking a shortcut, it was not helping himself. It was not showing him what he could do. That getting the assignment finished was not the point, but the process, and that he had made a mistake, but he was not a terrible person. That it was part of what I'd hoped would be his learning experience.
Did you do that to try and protect Erik from his mother's anger?
Sustained.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take quinol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why quinol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Quinol, the brand I trust.
Did you feel that as Erik's teacher, it was necessary for you to do anything to intervene when his mother became so angry?
Sustained.
And your was there any reaction on the part of Mrs. Menendez to your kind of explaining to Erik that a mistake, that shortcuts weren't good?
She, when I had finished, she returned to her idea of she couldn't believe that she couldn't see how he could do such a thing.
Mrs. Howarth was copying word for word from a World Book Encyclopedia, a particularly clever way of not doing your own work.
It was not deviant. It was not devious. That was one of the reasons that I felt that we should handle this situation with the head of upper school. He didn't change the word order. He didn't substitute vocabulary for words that he didn't know. He didn't omit. And it was the World Book. It was just word for word from the World Book. So it was not streetwise if he were trying to.
Let me just ask you questions about one additional area. You're aware that Erik had an older brother named Lyle.
Yes, I am.
And Lyle also went to PDS.
That's right.
He was 2 years older than Erik.
He was a senior when Erik was a freshman.
Mrs. Howarth, how did you first become aware that Erik had an older brother named Lyle?
Everyone at school knew Lyle. Lyle was very good at tennis and brought a great deal of positive publicity to the school. And I taught Lyle at the end of his senior year, but before that I had read quite a lot about Lyle in Erik's journal.
Okay, what's the journal?
In the ninth grade, students are asked to keep a journal, not write in it every day, but once a week, once every 2 weeks. There would be an open-ended assignment of write about a member of your family, write about something you did last weekend. The idea for the journal was to have students writing about things they knew well about and to develop a fluency. From that journal, some later writing assignments would grow.
And would you read your students' journals as part of your class?
I would collect them every 4 weeks or so, or we would go over them in conference. I did not grade the journals. I would either write a letter back to the student about things in the journal, or I would talk to the students in conference about the journal.
What did Erik write about in his journal?
I would say 70% of his journal was about Lyle. Then there was entries about sports. Few other entries.
What would he write about, Lyle? Did Eric, based on your reading of his journal and seeing him in class, seem to look up to his older brother?
Very much so. I often thought he didn't, it wasn't just that he wanted to be like Lyle.
Question, speculation.
Okay.
All right, you've answered the question. Everything after yes is stricken as not responsive.
I just have a moment, right? Did Eric ever, in his journal, express a desire to be like his older brother?
Objection, Rosen.
Overall, you've answered the question.
He,
Do you recall that specifically, yes or no?
not in his journal, no.
Okay, did he ever express a desire to be like his brother outside of his journal?
There was one conference that we were talking about something that he had written about sports, about soccer. He was very good at soccer, and I asked him why he was not concentrating his sports efforts on soccer. He was wonderful on the soccer field. And he said because Lyle plays tennis. And I at the time I thought that's ninth grade logic at work that I don't understand.
Okay, thank you very much. I have nothing further at this time.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, did you require that your students keep journals for your class?
Did I
Is that it?
require that they
Yes.
keep? Yes, every student kept a journal.
Would they have a notebook for their journals?
Shape of the journal was up to the students. Some used spiral notebooks. Some used those notebooks that are black and white spatter on the cover. I asked that they not keep it as a part of their loose leaf notebook, however, because I wanted to be able to look with them at the progression of their writing through the year.
So did your students keep the journal for the entire semester,
For the year.
for the
But-
whole year?
Yes, but they did not write in it on a regular basis. It would depend on the other work that they had in the class. The writing was time consuming, and we often had very long reading assignments. They wouldn't have been able to do everything at once.
You had indicated that the class was about 40 minutes long, is that right?
Some days it was 40, sometimes it was as much as 55.
Did you see any of your students, their attention kind of wandering during the course of the class?
Yes,
That wasn't uncommon
it's less common than you might expect because
in your class?
because of the pace, and because in my classes as often as possible, I like to have the students carry the load. So I will ask a general question and let them respond. My role as teacher is to observe the way they are responding, the roles they play in discussion. Sometimes I would sit on they would be in a fishbowl, and the fishbowl discusses, and the circle around the fishbowl comments on the process of the discussion, and I keep track of the movement in the class.
Okay,
So-
I think I lost you at the fishbowl. What do you mean by that?
Students sit in the center and discuss an idea, half the students. The other half sit around the outside, and after 10 minutes, 15 minutes when I stop the discussion, they comment on what they've noticed about the way the discussion went and the roles that their peers had in the discussion. I would sit outside the circle and take notes on whether a student initiates, summarizes, helps another student into the discussion, all the different roles that they
Is
can
that the
have.
format that you had for your class throughout the year?
No, but twice a week probably, something like that. So it was very important for the students to be actively involved in the class. I run very few lectures. We don't sit in the same places all the time.
So there were 4 times that you would meet, this class would meet per week?
4 times a week. That's correct.
And the 2 other days that you didn't have this particular format, would it be a lecture format?
No, it would probably be small group work, or I'd give I don't like to lecture. It doesn't work for most high school students in my mind. So I don't lecture.
Would you see some of your students get bored on occasion with what was going on in class?
Yes, I would see a student or two. Some sounds like too many.
Okay. Now, would you say that it was fairly common in your experience in over 20 years of teaching that 9th graders are generally self-doubters at that period of their education?
It's a difficult transition year for many. Yes.
And did you indicate that it's fairly common for 9th graders to be self-doubters?
Not common enough to get interims and have it mentioned in reports home. There's a certain level of insecurity that you expect, and then there are some students who move beyond that level of uncertainty and self-doubting. But maybe in 2 classes, maybe 2 or 3 a year that need extra nurturing, the extra concern.
Do you remember
Giving a report?
giving an interview?
Yes.
And do you recall saying that it's fairly common for 9th graders to be self-doubters?
Objection, Your Honor. Impeaching.
Overall.
But what I'm saying is that,
Question is, do you remember saying that?
yes,
Now, let's get on to another topic here. You were saying that there was a problem that Erik Menendez.
Your Honor. Counsel didn't read the entire sentence to the
All right, let's have Ms. Morrison state this objection.
Objection, Your Honor. The entire sentence isn't being stated.
All right, the objection's overruled. All right, the next question, please.
There was you had testified earlier about a problem with an oral report by Erik Menendez. Do you
Today.
recall that?
yes. Today?
No.
Of course.
Basically, he cheated. Would that be fair to say?
objection, Your Honor. Cross speculation.
Overruled.
He did not follow the directions, and because he had a history of not following directions, I really didn't know if how much thought he had given to doing it the way he had done it. It did not go to judiciary.
I'm sorry. What was
It did not go to judiciary. It went to the head of the upper school. And that was a judgment call on my part because of the time of year, and I wanted immediate follow-up because of the history of not understanding what he was to do. And my not understanding why he didn't understand. I couldn't find whatever it was that was getting in his way to help him get rid of that, to help him change that pattern.
Okay, the question is, did he plagiarize his oral report?
Yes.
Did you instruct him to copy a report out of an encyclopedia?
No.
In fact, when you recognized that he had cheated, you called his mother. Would that be fair to say?
I went to Erik, and I think he brought his mother in on it.
Okay.
Because she had responded before the end of that day.
Now, when you initially confronted the defendant with your belief that he had cheated, he had plagiarized, did he deny that he had done so?
Yes, he did.
So he said, no, I didn't cheat?
Yes.
And what did you do at that point?
I decided I would have to investigate it further.
And what did you do in that regard?
I went to the library and went to the World Book. And it was the first book I looked at.
How did you suspect that he had cheated?
I believe that was in what I said earlier. He did not, he mispronounced several of the words. He didn't seem to understand what was, what was behind some of what he was saying. And it was also, he was clearly reading from cards rather than referring to cards.
And at that point, you confronted him with what you suspected about him cheating.
Objection passed.
I waited until after class, and I don't remember if it was directly after class or later in the day.
Okay, so did you ask him to stay after class so that
No.
you could talk to him?
No.
How did you confront him about this cheating?
I asked him if, I said that I did not think that these were his words, and that I felt he hadn't done the assignment the way it was intended.
Now, when he denied that he had cheated, was it you that called Mrs. Menendez up for a meeting?
No, I don't believe I did.
Okay. You indicated that Mrs. Menendez was called at some point. Do you recall who called her?
No, I don't remember.
You had indicated that during this meeting with Mrs. Menendez that there was yourself, the defendant, his mother, and somebody named Bing.
Mr. Bing, Sanford Bing, who was the head of the upper school.
Now, had you
Eric's advisor was not there, and I don't know why.
had you gone to Mr. Bing to let him know that you had caught Erik Menendez cheating?
Yes, I went to Mr. Bing even later in the day to advise him of what had happened. And first I talked to Erik, then I had to do the library, then I had to go to Mr. Bing, and I had 3 other classes during the day also.
Now, was it that day that Mrs. Menendez came for this meeting?
No, it was not. It was
the next day?
the next day or the day after.
Do you know if Mr. Bing called up Mrs. Menendez?
No, I'm not sure. I believe he said that I don't remember.
Now, you had indicated that Mrs. Menendez was at first a little upset with you for accusing her son of cheating.
Objection misstates the evidence. She was a little upset.
Rephrase the question.
Was Mrs. Menendez a bit upset with you for accusing her son of cheating?
I had written 6 reports instead of, well, at that point 5, instead of 3. She felt that she said she felt that I was picking on Erik, that I had been on his case all year, that I was being unfair to him, and that he would not do something like that.
He would not cheat like that.
He would not do that.
Did Mrs. Menendez appear to be protective of her son?
Objection calls for speculation.
At this meeting, when you presented evidence that Erik Menendez had in fact cheated, Mrs. Menendez became upset with her son.
That's correct.
Is that right? Now, the punishment for this was what?
Erik redid the report using 2 sources, using note cards, and he gave the report to me in my office, not to the whole class.
Had you had any other student in your class cheat such as that?
Objection irrelevant.
When Erik Menendez cried when he got these less than acceptable grades, did you feel sorry for him?
I was really worried about his overall performance. I'm not sure that I'd call it feeling sorry for him. I was concerned about the level of anxiety. I was concerned that this seemed to be a pattern, and I was frustrated in that I couldn't help him find a strategy to be more successful, or several strategies.
Did his crying make you do things that you wouldn't do for other students?
Would you say that again?
Yes. Did the defendant's crying when he got bad grades, would that make you do something that you wouldn't do for other students? For example, you indicated that you allowed the defendant to redo his paper and give the oral report simply in front of you rather than in front of the whole class. I take it that was an exception.
It was my effort to have him go through the process of the assignment. The day school allows teachers that kind of latitude, so that all of us teachers, I think, really do try to structure the class situation, the requirements of a course, so that they meet the individual needs of all our students. I have usually about 15 students in a classroom, which gives me time and space to be able to do that. But it often means, at least 12 variations on a theme, often for assignments and ways of responding to their responses. So I tried to find ways of putting less pressure while still demanding that he complete the things that were necessary for this development as a student.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Any redirect?
A couple questions, Your Honor. Mrs. Howarth, Mr. Kuriyama read to you from a copy of a report about an interview. Have you had a chance to look at that report?
Yes, I did look at that.
Okay, and did you, in the interview, say that it's fairly common for ninth graders to be self-doubters?
Yes.
Okay, and did you also say, as part of that same sentence, but Erik was an extreme case?
Yes.
Okay. And was Erik an extreme case of self-doubt?
Yes, of self-doubt and of anxiety.
Mr. Kuriyama asked you whether or not it was other students appeared to have their attention wander during your class. How would you characterize the degree of wandering that Erik did as opposed to your other students?
He frequently had trouble concentrating. That year, maybe there was one other, perhaps there were two other students in two ninth grade classes that I taught that might give me similar concern. But this combined with other things, I only wrote, I teach four upper school English. At that time, I was teaching 4 upper school English classes, and I believe I only wrote 3 interims for that first marking period. And then I wrote a second interim for Erik later in the year.
So that the things that you observed Erik doing, such as his attention wandering and his anxiety, were unusual.
That's correct.
Taken together and individually. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask you about the incident where Erik copied the World Book. And you had a meeting with his mother. You said that Mr. Kuriyama asked you about the mother saying that you had been picking on Erik.
Objection misstates the evidence.
Overall.
Had you been picking on Erik during the course of this year, Mrs. Howard?
I wouldn't characterize it in that way. I tried to give Erik as much attention as I could to address the problems that he was having. I did write more reports on Erik than I did on other students to try to keep the parents informed. His grades were not good,
Okay.
despite.
Did Mrs. Menendez ever express any resentment towards you for your comments?
No, nothing direct about the comments themselves.
What about Erik? Did you ever have any discussions with him about that he didn't like all these suggestions that you were making in his comments?
Objection, Johnson.
In conference, we would go over the comments and try to work on strategies that he could use so that the problems would not come up. We would.
That's not the question. Did he ever complain about your writing these comments?
No. No.
Did he appear to appreciate your efforts to help him?
Objection calls for speculation.
Just a-
Did he respond to your efforts to help him in these conferences? Did he listen?
Yes, and he was good about coming to conferences. And that was, again, particularly difficult because they
Can you
would,
answer the question?
yes.
Next question.
Okay. Was there ever any pattern to Erik's performance problems that you were able to discern?
No.
Objection, vague, and Johnson.
Sustained.
Do you, as a teacher, do you, in students, observe certain recognizable patterns? That is, somebody who has trouble reading will display certain problems. Is it
Objection,
somewhat
calls for
predictable?
Calls for an improper opinion.
All right, it's beyond the scope of the current examination. Anything else?
Perhaps. In your meeting with Mrs. Menendez, when she talked about dishonoring the family, did she say which family he was dishonoring? Is that the Menendez family?
She would, her words were the family name, the family honor. I had not heard that before.
Okay. All right, thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you, you're excused. All right, we'll take a 15-minute recess, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And we'll resume at 20 minutes to the hour. That's the council review.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
All right, as I indicated, I wanted counsel to pinpoint your examination, and this last witness was a witness who repeated many things that we've heard already and went over a lot of things that are cumulative. And the next witness or any other witnesses you're calling on these subjects had better be pinpointed and get to the specific issue that you want to bring out rather than go through all the same litany of things we've heard with other witnesses. And the next witness falls in that same category, and any other witnesses you have along those lines, if any. You've indicated you don't have any, but again, when I say pinpoint, I mean that. You're just going over and regurgitating things that other witnesses have already said. And it's cumulative and it's improper, and you should be aware of it as well. You must know when you ask these questions, you've heard these things before. They're nothing new. You've heard the same witnesses or other witnesses say the same thing. So at some point, even you will say enough is enough. Yes, I noticed Ms. Abramson's eyes wandering there. Okay, we'll be in recess until 22.
I was trying to get your attention to turn down the.
All right, the jury and all parties are present. In the case of People versus Erik Menendez, the defense may call its next witness.
Now we call Norman Poles.
Step forward, please.
and right hand, please, to be sworn. So, you solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please seated. You tell us your full name, spell your last.
The name is Norman. The last name is Puls. Puls.
I just lean back and the mic will pick up your voice.
Thank you.
Mr. Poles, do you work as a tutor?
I do.
And how long have you worked as a tutor?
About 13, 14 years now.
And is there any particular area that you teach students?
Yes, I tutor in all forms of mathematics and physics and chemistry.
Okay, and do you have any training, either education or on the job, that has prepared you to tutor students in these areas?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in engineering, a master's degree in engineering, and I have conducted and organized many industrial training programs.
And have you also worked as a consulting engineer for a period of time?
Yes, I have,
For how long?
since 1981.
Now, did you tutor Erik Menendez?
Yes, I did.
And when did you begin tutoring him?
The fall term of 1987,
And how long did you tutor him?
through his high school, into high school, which would have been about 2 years.
Okay, so you last worked with him in approximately June of 1989?
Yes, in the spring of 1989. That's
Okay,
right.
and the last spring that you worked with him would have been Erik's senior year in high school.
That's correct.
Now, where was Erik living at the time you first began tutoring him? Do you know?
No, not really.
Okay. How often did you tutor Erik?
Twice a week at least.
Okay,
Sometimes none if he was traveling.
all right. Normally, it was twice a week.
Normally it was twice a week, yes.
And you indicated that there were periods when you didn't tutor him at all during the week because he was traveling?
That's right.
Was he traveling for any particular purpose that you were aware of?
Yes, I was told it's for tennis, for tournaments or practice or whatever.
And how long would each session last?
Hour and a half at least.
Where were these tutoring sessions held?
In the Woodland Hills area.
Now, let me ask you, Mr. Poles, about to describe Erik as a student. Did he seem to be interested in mathematics?
I think he had a reasonable interest in mathematics, yes.
And based on your contacts with him, did he appear to try hard to learn?
I always thought so.
Okay. Did you notice any difficulties with Erik's attention span?
Yes.
What did you notice?
There were times when it was non-existent, times when he was spaced out. He would look at me and look right through me, and I would look at him and I realized there was nobody there behind the eyes. He was just not there. And other times he was in and sharp and brisk, and it would change in a matter of minutes sometimes.
Was this behavior that you saw in Erik unusual in your experience?
Yes.
And would you do anything to try and get Erik's attention?
Surely. I'd jump up and down, pound the table and make noise and shout and walk up and down and try different things to keep his focus on me. It was bad enough that other tutors in the same offices would pound on the walls and tell me to be quiet sometimes.
Now, in tutoring students, you sometimes encounter people who have problem concentrating or focusing. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
Was the problem that you observed Erik having something that was common among the students that you tutored?
The problem was common. However, in this case, it was exaggerated to a point I had never seen before or since.
Did you ever meet Mrs. Menendez, Eric's mother?
Yes, I did.
About how many times?
A small number of times.
Okay. And did you ever have any conversation with her about how Eric was doing or his progress?
I attempted to after a session, if she would be there waiting to pick Eric up, or I would come over to her and begin to tell her how her son did. And I felt she had no interest.
What makes you say that she had, or what makes you feel that she had no interest?
Sustained.
Did you ever meet Mr. Menendez?
Yes,
And approximately how many times did you meet him?
more than the mother, maybe 4, 5, 6 times.
And did you have any interaction with him about how Eric was doing?
Yes, I did.
And what type of interaction did you have with him?
Again, after the session, the father would approach and ask me, how did he do? Is he learning? Is he responding? He wouldn't get into detail because I don't think the father knew calculus or whatever. So he didn't want to know the details, but he did want to know whether we there at the tutoring organization was giving his boy his money's worth, and whether the boy was accepting what we were giving.
Was Eric accepting what you were giving?
About half the time.
And the time that he was, the half that he wasn't, was that because of this attention deficit that you've told us about?
Right, the total lack of, you go like this and there's nothing there behind the eyes. And that's when he was sharp, he was a good student.
Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Coles, how much is it per session for these tutoring sessions?
Dollars?
Yes.
Well,
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
I was not the receiver of the money. I was employed by a tutoring organization. So the Menendez family paid the organization. The organization then paid me.
How much,
So I don't know what they got.
how much did you get paid?
I got
Objection,
$20.
relevance.
Overruled. Go ahead.
I believe it was $20 an hour.
And you would meet with the defendant twice per week
On average, yes.
and about 3 hours per week, an hour and a half per session.
That's about it.
Would Mr. and Mrs. Menendez bring Erik Menendez to these tutoring sessions?
Only occasionally. Yes, occasionally.
And that's when you'd see the parents. And
That's right.
specifically, you saw Mr. Menendez, you said 4, 5, or 6 times.
That's right.
And Mr. Menendez asked you how his son was doing.
Yes.
Was it your understanding that Mr. Menendez traveled a lot in his business?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
The times that you did not see Mr. Menendez, was it Mrs. Menendez that would come?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony.
Why don't you rephrase the question?
Okay. How many times did you see Mrs. Menendez at your facility?
2, 3.
Would you send home progress reports to the family?
Not me. Maybe the school did, but I did not.
Do you know how the defendant was referred to this business?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
You indicated that you had tutored Erik Menendez for some year and a half. Is that correct?
I would say nearer to 2 years, but 2 school terms would be better put.
Before that, was he tutored by somebody else in the business?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay speculation. Personal knowledge.
Sustained.
Do you know a person at this business called Sally Jordan?
Yes.
Was she? Did you ever speak to Sally Jordan about Erik Menendez?
Yes.
Was she also a math teacher?
No.
What did she teach?
English.
So this business, it was called Scholars Unlimited, is that
That's correct.
There were different disciplines that were being taught. There
That's
were
correct.
tutors for different disciplines.
That's
So-
correct.
And your specialty was in math and chemistry and physics, I believe you said?
That's right.
Did you tutor Erik Menendez on anything but math?
I think we got into physics one term.
Now, there were some occasions when Erik Menendez had to go on a tennis tournament, is that right?
That's what I was told, yes.
Now, that wouldn't happen very often, though, would it?
How often is very often? I think it happened often. I think it was a matter of at least every third week or so, he would miss an appointment.
Would you call that an occasional miss?
It was more frequent than occasional, in my opinion.
Do you remember giving an interview in this case to the defense attorneys?
Yes, I did.
Would it refresh your present recollection to take a look at that report?
I did. I got a chance to see it.
Sure.
Oops. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a question. I can.
Well, does that refresh your present recollection?
It refreshes, but I don't believe it is. I don't believe it was transcribed correctly.
So you think this report is inaccurate?
In that sentence, yes.
Okay. Who did you speak to
Who are you talking about?
regarding this report?
To
Overall.
Miss Leslie Abramson and that lady and her private investigator, Ederly, I can't remember the name, I'm sorry.
Cindy Erdely?
Cindy Ederly, that sounds correct,
Okay.
yes.
Did the defense give you a copy of this report to refresh your recollection before you testified today?
Yes,
Okay, so you've seen this report before?
yes, I have. If that's the 3-page one, yes, I've seen it.
This is a 3-page report.
Then that's the one I've seen.
Now, this report then says that you had indicated, or you reported that Erik Menendez occasionally missed his lessons because of conflicts with his tennis lessons, correct?
That's what it says, yes.
And what you're saying now is that the defense report is inaccurate?
I think so. I think it should be more than just occasionally. It should say frequently.
Did you bring that to the attention of the defense attorneys in this case when you read it?
Overruled. Your answer.
Yes, I mentioned that I thought it was a error in copying or transcribing or understanding or whatever. I didn't think it was major, though, because the difference between occasionally and frequently is it's a matter of degree.
Okay. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Anything else?
Just one question. What about Mrs. Menendez's behavior caused you to think that she wasn't interested in how her son was doing?
Objection, yes.
Sustained.
Mr. Kuriyama asked you about meeting Mrs. Menendez 2 to 3 times.
Yes, you do.
During the 2 to 3 times that you met with her, did you have conversations?
Objection, ground scope.
Overruled to that question.
Did she speak to you?
Hardly at all. I attempted to speak to her and explain how her son was doing, and I got no response. And she.
All right. You've answered the question, sir.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right. Anything else?
No further questions.
All right. Thank you. You may step down. You're excused. Let me see counsel at the sidebar, please. All right. It's now 4:10, and they've run out of witnesses for the afternoon, so we'll recess until tomorrow at 9 o'clock when it's anticipated there will be additional witnesses. It's unclear as to how long we'll keep you here tomorrow. There are some matters that the lawyers and I have to discuss that have to be resolved, and it requires some time where all the lawyers are here to do that. And we're going to get a start on that tomorrow, and I'm not sure how long that'll take. Once I hear what everyone has to say, or at least they give me a preview of what they have to say, I'll be in a better position to tell you. But we will have some witnesses here, according to what the lawyers tell me, tomorrow morning at early in the morning. So I'll excuse you now and instruct you again not to discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else, or to form any opinions about it. And we'll see you all back here tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And by the way, I do have various requests from individual jurors as to time off. If I make a chart of them, it makes me a little cross-eyed just looking at them, because everyone has a little different time that they want to be off, and it's going to be almost impossible to coordinate all of that. And I'm sure you can understand that with 18 of you there. Everyone has your own situation, and it's kind of difficult to do that, to accommodate everybody. But as I become aware of dates when things won't be in session, I know in advance that things won't be going on. I'll let you know as soon as I know. But unfortunately, lots of times here, I don't know until the last minute. And when I do find out, I certainly do let you know. All right, we'll see you all back here tomorrow at 9 o'clock.